Welcome to the September 11th, 2018 school board meeting of the Shorewood School District. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Hillary DuBois is absent. And first order of business is to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
I second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Dr. Davis, can you remind us of our overarching result?
Yes, our overarching result for the School District of Shorewood is our students are leaders who challenge themselves to grow and achieve academically, pursue their passions, navigate change, learn continuously, and contribute to the common good.
Thanks. Awards and recognitions tonight.
Yeah, so we're back in the swing of things, so quite a few announcements, awards and recognitions for tonight. So first of all, I want to acknowledge recent Shorewood graduate Reed Faulkner and current SHS senior Sophie D'Amato, who were recently featured in the Journal Sentinel for a video series they're helping the Village, BID, and the Shorewood School District create. These videos will be published monthly, starting this month, to help showcase both residents and outsiders the amazing things that Shorewood has to offer as a village. So be on the lookout for these videos, and congratulations to those two students. Next, congratulations to the students who were recently cast in the upcoming SHS fall play, To Kill a Mockingbird. The performances will take place on October 11th through the 13th, and you can view the full cast by visiting the district website. So looking forward to that performance. Next, I want to recognize our school board president, Dr. Paru Shah, who recently learned that she will be recognized with a Level 1 Member Recognition Award from the WASB Member Recognition Program for her commitment to the board, for board development. Just listen.
Oh, sorry.
She achieved this status by attending multiple WASB and NSBA, the National Association, events and participating in specific activities. She'll be publicly recognized at the upcoming WASB Fall Regional Meeting. So congratulations on your service.
Thank you.
Finally, also want to congratulate 5 Shorewood staff members who have reached the 25-year employment mark with the district, so thank you for your commitment to our district and the students. We have Gail Yanish, a 6th grade teacher at Lake Bluff, Kristen Johnson, reading teacher at SIS, Meg Nolan, special ed aide at SHS, Benny Simmons, head custodian at Lake Bluff, and Joanne Manuel, custodian 2 at Lake Bluff. So congratulations to all of them, and thank you for your service. Athletically, congratulations to the SHS tennis team, who were the champions of the Kenosha St. Joe's Quad that took place at Carthage College back on August 25th, so just prior to the school year starting. The team played very solid and came through some big matches, so they continue to play well, so congratulations, ladies. Congratulations to the SHS boys cross country team, who won the small school division for the Milwaukee River Invitational held at the Lincoln Golf Course on August 23rd. The event was hosted by Shorewood and Rufus King and included 25 schools, so it was a great win for the boys, so keep up the good work. And lastly, want to congratulate, large congratulations to SHS junior soccer player Austin Gale, who was recently featured as the Player of the Week in the Journal Sentinel. Gale has been a fantastic finisher for the boys team, recording 13 points in the team's 5 matches. He scored twice in victories over Greenfield and Greendale, and recently helped the team's winning record and helped raise his goal total to 6 on the season. So congratulations to Austin, and keep up the good work. That concludes our announcements and recognitions for tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, so up first on our focus on student achievement and results, we're going to hear from the Shorewood Rec Department on their summer highlights.
So bring the
Exhausted Shorewood Rec Department.
Yes. So most of us are energized for our back to school time. There's one group that's exhausted at our back to school time, and so these are these fine folks who have been working hard and really providing incredible services for all of our students and community members throughout the summer. So I wanted the chance to recognize them for their hard work and have them talk a little bit about what events happened over the summer. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jody.
There we go. Okay, hello, my name is Jody Brooks. I'm the Director of Recreation and Community Service for the Shorewood School District. With me tonight is Megan Phelan, Recreation Supervisor, Justin Calvert, Recreation Supervisor, and Jake Wilson, Fitness Center Manager. So we're going to each touch base a little bit on what we were up to this summer and give you a little deeper, a little more information. I will start with Summer Sounds. Deb Stoltz, the previous director, actually scheduled the concerts and the bands. So when I started, I took over and handled the logistics as the summer progressed. We did have 8 concerts at Hubbard Park on Wednesday nights. No rainouts.
Oh,
It was
wow.
very, very close
Yeah.
one night, but the band and the staff, Justin and Megan, were there that night. I was at a funeral actually, so they were there that night and they stuck it out, and the band was very cooperative, and we started a few minutes late, but that was as close as we came to a rainout. The picture here is kind of tough to see, but that's 5-card studs, and there was probably roughly 1,000 people there that night.
Wow.
Great.
So yeah, that's an estimate,
Yeah.
and so I might have handpicked the particular picture from the 8 nights, and that was a very popular night. We do that in cooperation with the Village of Shorewood, who were very helpful. They set up the site, put up the signs, that kind of thing, and Hubbard Park Lodge and Russ Davis. Their staff gets everything in order. They sell refreshments. They put up a stage that stayed there all summer, which was very convenient, because we could tell the bands, come whenever you want, the stage is ready to go. And then we did, our sponsors were Remax Lakeside, Shorewood Men's Club, Chief Personal Fitness, Blues Egg, and Family Pharmacy. So the sponsorships paid for all of the bands, so we just put in the effort to make sure everything was good to go the night of the concerts, and things went really well.
Jody, can I ask a question, what the process is for selecting bands? I don't know, like, do we take applications, or how do we do it?
Well, word of mouth, I think, for the most part. 5-card studs will always come back. They were our second band at the second Wednesday, and as close as we can get to the beginning of the Summer Sounds, I'd like to have them back, because the place was packed. So anyone there would have seen all the signs saying what the next bands are.
Okay,
So
Great way to
you
start.
can't argue that people didn't know we were there every Wednesday, because the signs were up and the place was packed. But word of mouth for the most part. Suggestions, we will go and, or I will, I don't want to act like I did this in the past, but we'll look up YouTubes, we'll look up websites, and mainly just people will tell us. I'm going to meet with Greenfield soon, who does this similar program, and talk to them about who they used and what was successful. So that kind of thing, just networking and word of mouth.
Okay, so next up is Home Base and Kids Club. So this is our summer playground program that serves us a little bit like childcare, even though we refer more to as summer camp. But it's summer supervision for a lot of kids in our in the Shore community, and we also take on residents as well. From this, we have 3 supervisors and about 30 to 40 employees, depending on if they're subs or helping out every day. But daily, we have between 150 and 160 kids going through this program. So Home Base is our morning program, so it goes from 7 a.m. till about noon, and then from lunchtime until 5:30 p.m. we have our Kids Club program. So we're able to be flexible for those families and sign up for programs. This is mostly at SHS, so Home Base, our morning program, was in the youth center here at the high school, although that's a program that we would walk kids to and from their recreation programs in summer school. And then Kids Club was here at the SHS campus outside, and at Atwater Elementary School as well. So we walk them throughout the community, Estabrook Park, Atwater Beach, the Village Library, and so on activities.
Enrichment classes, this is tough because we have dozens of enrichment classes. So here's just an example of some of those. Drama Junior, which actually Justin will, it rises above one of our weekly or every 2 weeks enrichment classes. But sign language, keyboarding, summer strings, a theater intensive that Justin will mention later. Elementary orchestra, just some really great programs. We had, I think, close to 60 participants in the elementary orchestra. Make Your Own Arcade, that's Colin Kinney back there, Tim Kinney's son. He put the prize booth there together. Future architect, I think, that was impressive. So we do that kind of thing. Tree climbing, which we do throughout the year. We still have tree climbing this week. So, which if you've ever been to Lake Bluff and watched them in the trees, it's kind of cool. So we did a ton of enrichment classes, and we'll see a little video from one of those here in a few minutes. See on that page. All right, hold on.
I
I'm just gonna talk a little about the theater intensive class that we offered. So a little background on it. 3 summers ago, 2 Shorewood students came to me, Ryan Greshel and Michaela Campbell, and said, hey, can we offer this class, you know, and we love to get students involved and have them put their own ideas out there and teach the younger kids, the younger generation. So we started this class 3 summers ago, and this past year was the 3rd summer, and we did, they kind of built it up as they went. And I got a little paragraph from Ryan and Michaela, some thoughts about how they thought it went over the 3 years. So just going to read you a little about that. So we first had the idea to create this program because I was looking for summer work and wanted to give back to the Shorewood drama community that had done so much for us. 3 summers later, we firmly believe that creating and teaching this summer theater intensive class was one of the highlights of our high school career. Ryan says, my educational career goals reflect my belief that good artists and good works of art enlighten, entertain, and give back, and I believe that this class achieved all of those goals. Additionally, the program not only benefited students, but also had a deep impact on my life. Through teaching this class, I learned how to teach and communicate with students. I improved my mentorship skills and created fantastic relationships with students that will continue to grow over the years to come. For our production of The Beauty and the Beast this summer, Michaela and I served as directors, costume designers, prop masters, and scenic designers. Therefore, we relearned the great importance of every aspect of the theater, initially taught to us by Sarah Van Loon, who runs our Drama Junior program. Ryan said, this experience convinced me that my purpose is to be a theatrical director, and I am now pursuing directing opportunities at James Madison University. Michaela is studying at the American Musical Dramatic Academy in Los Angeles. Michaela ended with, we will never forget the memories made and the kids that were happy to be a part of it. So they did a Beauty and the Beast. They had 2 weeks to prepare and plan and get all the costumes and everything, and they did a lot of great work, and we put on I think it was about 40 minutes long. They told me 30 minutes, but it went over, so no big deal. We packed the studio theater, and we had a great time, and they did a fantastic job. But it just reiterates the fact that the Shorewood students are so talented, and that they can, you know, teach the younger generation what they learned and what they love.
I would just agree with you that they are talented, but no more so than any other kids in other communities. But what they do have is the fact that you've created a space where they can spread their wings. And I was thinking about policy result 3.2, which is contribute to a better world by applying their knowledge and skills. And you've created an opportunity, the rec department's created an opportunity for kids to not be told no, but let's work with you and
Figure
for
out
them
a way to say yes. That's really important.
so I applaud you for that, and you're gonna have, and I think that's excellent.
Did Michaela and
That's
Ryan help identify the next people to take this over?
They haven't yet, but they
They're
assured me
gonna
they
work
would
on
find
that?
someone.
And it's possible Dave might come back, right?
True, yeah. Depends on
Right.
depends on what their summers are like.
Right.
So,
That's great.
then these are a couple pictures that might be a little tough to see, but we put on Drama Junior Peter Pan Jr. this year. We had, that's led by Sarah Van Loon, a district employee. We had 65 students involved in the entire process, 50 in the cast and 15 in the tech, who built the set that they're all standing on, painted it, designed the lights and all the colors in the background. 11 staff members and numerous volunteers that show up on a daily basis or once in a while to kind of help out and share their knowledge too. So those are a few pictures from our play, and it was fantastic in my opinion.
And we had a pretty extensive waiting list too, so.
25, I think, was on the waiting list. So 25 that we couldn't allow in because we don't have the space or the parts or the staff. So pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Also, a few points I want to highlight on our sports programs that we did this summer. So majors and minors is our baseball program run by Mr. Doherty. It's been going on for many, many years. We had 200 kids exactly in that program. So there's 101 in one program and 99 in the other, and we had a really good summer. Ended with a great all-star game under the lights. A lot of fun to be had. So 320 participants involved in tennis lessons throughout the course of the summer. That goes from private to group lessons to adult lessons. Old Men Lacrosse, which is, I didn't create that name. That was the name given. So it had 43 participants, ranges from ages 11 to age 63. And the premise of it is that fathers sign up or coaches sign up and they participate with their middle school son or daughter. We haven't had any daughters, but sons. And they play fun games with lacrosse on the high school field, run by Kevin Kane, another district employee. Sports camps are huge for us. We try to get as many coaches involved so they can run a camp through our department. We use it as a fundraiser for their program as well as kind of like a feeder building to their high school. So I listed all the different ones that we had. We raised probably just over $7,250 that goes directly to athletics for them to use for their programs. And it's awesome because they can meet the younger kids and the younger generations interested. And finally, we had 15 participants in our first ever mountain bike essentials camp. So that was pretty cool. They had a fun time. They got rained on a few days, but they pushed through and turned out to be a good program. And a couple pictures here. There's our mountain biking group. They rode up to Port Washington the final day from here, so it's a pretty good hike. There you can see Kevin Kane in the top right corner doing his lacrosse camp. And then on the bottom was our football camp. And we got a number of high school players that came and helped out with that. So pretty fun time this summer.
Kids working really hard.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't look like you probably moved
He's
that
not
far,
doing
does it?
All right, and we can move on. Jody's going to tell you a little more about
Our cardboard boat building, this
Oh,
is
wow.
one of our enrichment programs, and this was kind of a fun video. It's a week-long class, the kids make their boats, and then on Friday, they try to sail them. And I'll walk through the hallways, and just kind of, in the back of my mind, judge their boats without saying it out loud, like, won't float, will float, maybe. And then we find out on Friday which ones do and which ones don't, and you'll take a look here.
Yeah, it's not like,
Life jackets required.
yeah, and paddles.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's fun. That's fun.
That's
There
great.
you go, yeah, it wasn't too competitive, those girls, they
They
put
smoked
together
them.
a nice boat, and the motor,
Right.
they had the best motor too.
Smart, very smart.
And then afterwards, we've got to get all the cardboard off the bottom of the pool. It would be a challenge, but that was a fun program, and a lot of, I don't know if you could see, but a lot of parents come and watch on that Friday also.
That's great.
All right, and then on to some numbers that we thought were important. We did have 5 Red Cross babysitting classes, which we're always excited to offer those to teach some life skills and some babysitting skills. So the
Hey,
max on those.
can I ask
Oh,
a
yeah.
question on that?
Yeah.
If parents are looking for a kid who's taken a babysitting course, can they contact the rec department? And is there a way to help, to somehow connect kids who took it to parents who are looking for babysitters?
Yeah, we actually got this question this afternoon too, which made me think, because we were gonna ask student support to see if they had a list of babysitters. I think what I'll do moving forward is just
Get
ask
some sort of
parents permission
permission?
while they're in the class. We
That makes
always
sense.
get nervous, handing them out.
Right.
So
Right.
I will definitely ask parents and see if that's something that they wanna be on the list on.
Or some way to say, here, you can contact this parent of a child and
Yeah.
see, or whatever, because
Yeah.
I get asked the question by neighbors and I'm like, I don't
Well,
know.
and have them contact us. Usually what I'll do is recommend some kids club and home base employees that I know are in the area. I'll ask them first if they wanna me to
Yeah.
pass their name along or
Right.
work with them that way. So, yeah, they're always welcome to reach out to us. So yeah, those were a max of 10, so we had about 50 kids go through that program, which was great. We also showed, or presented 3 outdoor movies at Lake Bluff outside on the lawn there. So we had Coco, Lion King, and Cars 3, which one of them was inside. I think it was Coco, which unfortunately that was the one that kids were looking most forward to, but we did have a rain location in the cafeteria that a handful of kids came to. We had hundreds of kids in our swim lessons, which is always great to see. And then over 150 employees during the summer, which is part-time and full-time seasonal employees. So apologies to the business office for all those timesheets, but we had a ton of kids, which is awesome just
Great.
to see, as most of them it's their first job or they're in high school and that sort of thing, but we also do have a lot of teachers and professionals that will come and work for us in the summer if they have time off, which is awesome too. With that, we did have 25 teen volunteers, which if you're familiar with our program, we have a lot of teens, grades 7 through 12, who will apply to become team volunteers, go through an orientation, and then sign up for programs. So we had 808 total logged hours, which is also an incredible statistic to share too. On the bottom, we do have some pictures of our Kids Club and home-based program. That was from our summer banquet. We did recognize some of our employees with our summer banquet in August. On the bottom there, we have Kevin. He received a leadership award, Lowell for innovation, Josue for quality, Lauren customer service, and then Elena for teamwork. So those are nominated all by their peers for specific awards that just highlight exceptional service to our program and our district.
And then that's the staff picture of them.
On the right. I just want you to know that you see that ad McDonald's has, it says, you know, America's best first job in Shorewood, the rec department is the best first job. It really is.
Yeah.
And then for the fitness center, we were able to expand our reimbursement programs for senior citizens. We include now the pool for the reimbursement program, so that'll be great to get more usage out of the pool and more members here. We added Optum Fitness Advantage, which includes United Healthcare, so that's a huge program in the area. So we're very thankful to be able to add that program. And the numbers in parentheses are just the numbers of members that we have in each. We just added Optum Fitness Advantage less than 2 weeks ago, so we already have 15 members from that, which is awesome to see. We converted a staff parking spot into a handicap parking spot, so we had some requests for additional handicap spots over there, so we were able to accommodate that request. And then the last point is summer months are pretty slow in the fitness industry. However, we were able to, August, put together our best month of personal training in the history of the fitness center, so it's very exciting for us.
Yeah, and that is an area we're looking to potentially expand in the future. We have a part-time person now that's in charge of personal training, but we may, in the next year or two, maybe look to make that a full-time job if it makes sense financially. We're still trying to determine if the switch from part-time to full-time would make sense. But yeah, we're backlogged on personal fitness requests, so
Yeah, absolutely.
it's very popular right now.
Yeah, we got to the point actually where we were struggling to find a personal trainer for some people, but we made it happen. We got them all taken care of, so. It was a good problem to have, but it was still a problem we had to tend to.
Yeah, well, this is the first summer, not only both of my children have taken advantage of rec department programming, but my father is part of the Silver Sneakers group and looks forward to going to the gym
Excellent.
frequently and has his trainer, and also does those Monday afternoon classes with his workout buddy Lance over there. So you have just great offerings. I mean, it meets the needs of the third graders and you know, the seniors in town, so.
I'll be the personal trainer for when we call you.
Perfect.
It's not enough hours, believe me.
That is it from us. If you have any questions, or if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. We're always there.
So Jody, I just want to hear from your perspective. This is your first summer, so what are your impressions? Kind of, these guys are, they're experienced.
Yeah, it was, I've dealt with Sheboygan Crazy, now I've dealt with Shorewood Crazy. It's just different, but yeah, it was very hectic. To be honest, I kind of enjoyed it. During the day, I was somewhere all the time. There was always something to check on. I enjoy it for the short term. A 12-month situation like that, you know, you want to be able to step back and breathe and plan for the future. But yeah, these guys put in so much time and energy throughout the summer that, yeah, you mentioned earlier, everyone else is coming back and getting geared toward the school year, but as much time and effort as they put in during the summer is very impressive.
And the two unsung heroes are not sitting at the table with you. It's just
Oh,
Barb
yeah,
and
yeah.
Nora, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of feel bad that I didn't mention them, but yeah, they're tremendous.
Yeah.
I've been here almost 5 months now, and these guys have made it so easy, and they do such a great job that I truly appreciate it.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
And congratulations.
Yeah. Okay. Up next on the agenda is public comments, opportunity number 1. Okay. So we're gonna move on to district operations, and Dr. Davis is going to start with a back-to-school overview.
All right, so I wanted just to give a little perspective of our back-to-school work. Our staff has done a lot of work over the summer to prepare for the school year, both our administrators from back in our administrative retreat. We spent some time with some districts that are using a similar governance model for us back in July to be able to get together over in Madison. Had our administrative retreat and then did our back-to-school in-servicing. So wanted to walk you through a little bit of our process, just to give you some flavor for that, and then talk all the way through our professional development and then some trainings that we had done, which proved to be pretty successful. So I thought today was a good chance to kick that off. So one of the things we've been very consistent on over the last couple of years, is both our branding with the colors and the website. So we've gotten some good feedback on that, but also the tagline that we've been using. Equity, growth, and excellence for all. So it's really been an opportunity for us to reinforce our values that are reflected in our results policies and all of our operational expectations of really making sure that we can provide equity, support growth, and inspire excellence. And that's how we've been talking about our tagline and our mantras coming through. One of the main things I think that I took at least from the summer was, again, in conversations with some of my peer superintendents along with our staff, is really getting back to this boardroom to classroom alignment. And so as we've been building our policies, doing some baseline work, and now monitoring those, it's a really important progression as we're moving forward. We have some districts that are peer districts that have been through this process 3 or 4 times, and so are maybe 4 or 5 years ahead of us. And so we've been able to take some good lessons from them into making sure that we're as efficient as possible. So when we did our administrative retreat this year, we talked about really kind of recalibration from boardroom to classroom. So what's really helpful for us administratively is that we have the results, policies, targets, that those indicators are clear for us as far as what we need to hit. And now it's just a matter of just making sure that our processes are aligned. One of the main takeaways that I took from some of my peers as superintendents was making sure that that you continue to stay focused and stay refined. And sometimes you're going to find in the evolution that maybe there was indicators that made sense at one point but don't make sense anymore, or they landed in the wrong report or something like that. And so they warned, because some places have struggled with this, of just adding indicators but not naming some as maybe indicators that aren't effective, but well, we really don't want to move them or we don't want to eliminate them. And then you get these monstrous reports to where if everything is important, like nothing is important type of thing. So really trying to stay focused and refine. So that's some of the exercises that I took back for our administrative team to work through it. So I just wanted to give you just a visual that we've been using as part of our professional development, both with our administrative staff and our teaching staff. So again, using these board policy, the results policies as our main drivers, especially as we're talking to teaching staff about coming back and what are we doing our goal setting on. So academic mastery, character and citizenship, and wellness. And what we did with our administrators during the retreat then is talk about all of the things that we have. We know we have indicators that are important under each one of those policies, but we had a conversation about what are the highest impact indicators. So if you had to focus on 3 to 5 things across the board, what would those things be that you think that if we did these things really well, then measures on other indicators would go up? So try to do some prioritization, if that makes sense. And so what we spent a lot of time on then during our retreat was to kind of tease that out. And so each principal did this individually, and then collectively we talked and put together themes. And so essentially what we came up with was thinking through kind of from an academic standpoint, literacy and math. Again, everything's important, but if we can fundamentally get literacy and math at a point where we're proficient in using these measures, those measures are already things that are part of our results policies, so that's good. We also include passages, and I know we've highlighted passages here throughout the last probably 3 or 4 months since they've occurred. But Passages have come across as this really important space for our students to be able to provide some voice into their learning experiences, and we think that just continues to be reinforced across the board. So you'll see Passages, we think, are a really important indicator, not only for academic mastery, where students can talk about their strengths, but also talk about their character and citizenship and talk about wellness. So I mean, I think, you know, what you heard tonight from the students that had run the drama program, I envision, you know, what could they have provided in their passage their junior year after they've done an experience like this, right? They could, right, yeah, so we heard that voice. Now, institutionally, now we're allowing for that space to happen every year. So, so we're excited to keep that going. So one of our revelations as we were looking through some of the indicators was the idea that in some of our indicators we take a look at things that might be kind of with a deficit view, kind of a negative lens, right? And so, so the example that sticks out to me is an indicator for wellness on behavior referrals. So again, behavior referrals, yeah, so behavior referrals are something that we already have in OE10 as far as learning environment. So it's not like we're not tracking that. But from a wellness standpoint, you know, that's a pretty like a don't do this type of perspective versus thinking through like what do we want students to aspire for? What do we want staff to be able to provide for students? And that has really honestly changed the dynamic and the dialogue that we're able to have with staff through professional development, through some early goal setting, is what can we aspire to do? Because a lot of the conversation we said when we're talking about behavior referrals all the time, then that's what we talk about is behavior referrals all the time, right? And when we're talking about connectedness with kids, like then we talk about how are you connecting with all kids all the time from the beginning of the year. And that is a much more kind of strengths-based asset, you know, building type of conversation that we feel is really important. We already measure it as part of our school perceptions data. What we don't have it in necessarily right now is an indicator for our policies. And so what Tim will provide tonight is just some conversations that we've had similar to connectedness and drive and citizenship to maybe shift some of our perspectives or have some indicators in those in character and citizenship and wellness specifically that is more driven on kind of this aspirational strengths-based type of perspective. So that was really insightful for me, and I've definitely felt kind of this value add to that as we've been talking with our principals and then talking with our staff coming back. So that's why I highlighted those in the diagram. So one of the questions was, where does our strategic plan fall? And so what we had some conversations, actually brought in some leadership from the SEA to just to talk through this diagram and making sure that we had some perspective on from them. And they really helped be able to guide this because these strategic plan examples as district resources was really important, and the reinforcement of that we're striving for these board indicators and goals that are already set, so we know what the targets are. The strategic plan in itself isn't like a necessarily goal setting document, but is really providing resources. So things like expeditionary learning are ways to get to connectedness or ways to get to citizenship. So trauma-sensitive practices is some work that we've done this year. Again, is to move the needle on these indicators, and then student goal setting and reflection can go across the board for all three of those too. So as you look at the strategic plan and where it fits, we really positioned it as a district resource that would be driven from all three of our student results policies, that we should be able to see progress in our indicators if those strategies in our strategic plan are done effectively. And then finally, again, getting boardroom to classroom, so where do our teachers fall? So building in teacher action plans and being able to do that work. And so we've been continue to talk about this refinement and what I'm calling just recalibration with making sure that our staff clearly knows kind of what the board expects as far as indicators. And part of the importance of finding some high impact student results indicators is that, you know, teachers can't measure 1,000 different things. And so can we look at some things that everybody can get around and kind of rally around and be able to have some strategies that they can use in their classroom, whether you're a first grade teacher or a calculus teacher, connecting with your students in your classroom is really important, right? And using that to inform your instruction is really important. Understanding goal setting with students. And so we've tried to be able to, again, prioritize and have what we call these high impact indicators to be able to really drive that boardroom to classroom goal setting to where the building leadership teams with the principals, which are representation of each building, are setting goals at the building level, and then each teacher will be meeting with their principal to talk about their goals and how their goals then are connected back to how they're moving forward with connectedness. How are they moving forward with their academic mastery? How are they moving forward with the drive and citizenship? Because we believe that if we get everybody in the system, right, around this, rowing in the same direction and around in their own different way, but getting at the same indicators, that's going to be able to move the needle for us as we're moving forward. And what we don't want to have is people going in 1,000 different directions where we could have successful departments, maybe on particular indicators that are never reported at the board level. Right? And so we want to make sure that there's as much continuity as possible. Still, in the autonomy from a staff standpoint is how you get there. Right? And so how you connect then is up to you. We provide some suggestions to the strategic plan, but we have very talented staff that have a lot of different resources that they can use. But at the end of the day, we want to measure students' connectedness. We want to measure students' drive and citizenship. And are they contributing? Do they have opportunities? So those are the things that we're looking at. So any questions on that?
I have some comments, but I think they're going to come out when we talk about the results
Okay.
of R3 and R4.
Yeah.
And then can I just get clarity on, who was involved in this process? You said yourself, the district administrators, and the SEA?
Yes. So originally our administrative team had worked through kind of the process of identifying the high impact indicators and putting the I would say a rough draft together.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tim and I met with the SEA leadership to be able to just talk through and react to, I would say, the model and what made sense, knowing that as we're bringing this to the entire staff then in August, we just wanted some perspective on just sense making of this.
Okay.
As we move forward.
And how was it received?
I think it was received well. I mean, I'll go through the very end to look at kind of the effectiveness in the entire week. But I think really when I went across to different buildings as they were talking about these, so we had kind of a strategic plan morning after our back to school breakfast in the afternoon, then buildings went back to talk about these. And these were the diagrams that were used, and again, our staff doesn't really wonder if you need to be able to connect with kids, right? And so the indicators are pretty clear. It's just a matter of how those are measured and then what actions I can take to be able to do that. So yeah, so I think feel like it's a good start. So
real quick,
yep.
I appreciate how you kind of flipped the script on looking at this from a deficit approach and looked at, versus,
I like that a lot more.
referrals, to how do we connect, but then you also said, and I agree, our staff knows how to connect with kids.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard discussions, and if so, what types of discussions about kind of just strategies and ways to ensure that every kid has an adult in whom they can feel comfortable? I know what's happening, I just want to know, as a result of this shift, there's been maybe new strategies.
Yep, so that's in the works. So we'll have that documented. So goal setting occurs over the first month of the school year once staff is able to really get to know their students. They have some strategies set. We also, through our Racework professional development, provided some research-based strategies connecting specifically with students of color because we know from our student results that we've got a pretty big gap between how our white students feel that they connect and have a sense of belonging in our schools and what our African American students feel. So we're cognizant of that, and we've talked through some strategies. The strategies are typically strategies that are good for all kids. Understanding backgrounds, values, like that type of work. That's pretty consistent with good teaching, but it's just being extra cognizant of being able to use those strategies. So I think in a lot of cases it's been a reminder, but that's something that we can report on later also, Pablo, just to kind of get an inventory of
Pablo,
different
for whatever it's
strategies.
worth, I had just a passing conversation with Tim Kenny after one of the first days and just asked him how the first day went, and I'm assuming each principal did this, but they did a bunch of team building work at the high school, and he walked me through some of it, and it was all related to this, and it sounded fabulous. So I was pretty pleased to hear it.
So just getting at, and I'm not going to go through all of these, because Tim will talk about this a little bit later for the results indicators, but just to give you a feel for what drive means. So these are the questions that we've asked students on our school perception survey every year, or for the last 2 years in the spring. So these are just the indicators that we're looking at doing some measurement on. The recommendation was to not necessarily look at individual questions, but to look at the indices collectively. So as you would look at all 4 or 5 questions in that indices, you know, is that a measure that you can look at, you know, improving? Because when you look at individual questions, there might be some variation within that. The indices gives you a little bit better perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about that more later. One of the questions that came up again, so our first day was really strategic plan. Our second day was our race work day. So this is the 3rd year that we've worked, taken some specific days to look at our achievement gap and paying our educational debt for our students of color, and making sure that we're evolving our system. We know that our board policies require us to disaggregate our academic data and our other data by race and gender. Race is what we focus on. So one of the questions that we talked about with the SEA again was, how does race work fit into this? Because is it part of the strategic plan, which it is, but we really framed it, and I think this was a successful way to look at it and explain it, is look at it as a way, use race work as a way to look at the entire system. So it's not necessarily a specific strategy, but it'd be a way to look at academic mastery. So looking through a racial lens, how do you see your academic data? Looking through a character and citizenship lens, how do you see that data? How do you see wellness as it's disaggregated by race? And that seems to be a really good way to be able to infuse conversations about curriculum development, about code of conduct and behavior, about wellness and support for families, to be able to just use that lens and develop empathy with our staff. So has seemed to be a successful way to look at that perspective. So we spent our race work day on Tuesday.
Wait, Brian, can we pause a second?
Oh, sorry.
I think the other value there, and it's not that dissimilar from the point you made earlier about changing it to an aspirational view, is this then makes us look at all students through the lens of race, whether you're a white student or a student of color, and that is exactly how we ought to be doing it, because we treat students differently unknowingly or unintentionally, and that's the only way you're going to view it, is if you actually look at everyone and not simply a subgroup.
Absolutely, and there's great value on, we talk a lot about having conversations about race and being comfortable with those conversations. There's incredibly great value to white students to have those conversations about race and to understand some perspectives that they might not be experiencing themselves. So as we're, just to boil down an entire day's worth of work, really 2 things that we're looking at for themes, so this is oversimplifying, but things that we've learned over the last couple of years and wanted to make sure we were reinforcing is that there's really, our research says, and this is a lot from Claude Steele's work on stereotype threats and some of the work that we'll be also doing with Dr. John Diamond from UW-Madison, but is around this idea that there's 2 things that really need to be present in school systems in order to pay educational debt or close achievement gaps. So one is rigorous high quality instruction. So there needs to be, students need to have exposure to that high quality instruction, and it needs to be consistent on a regular basis. Again, that's for all kids, but it's important to make sure that we're not tracking kids into particular areas, and that when we're looking at teacher quality and rigor in the classroom, that is really important. The other piece that's as important, and it's an and both and not an either or, is this sense of belonging. Is that students need to feel like they belong as students in the building, in that classroom, that they can achieve, like do this rigorous work. They need that extra reinforcement, and we know from our experiences outside, and a lot of this is just structural, like within our society or within our communities, and somewhat within our schools, is that we do have deficits, like we do have stereotypes that students are coming in with, and that are placed on them that shouldn't be, that are socially constructed, that are not real, but that we have an obligation to make sure that we're addressing those things, those stereotypes when they're in our system. So being really deliberate then about sense of belonging, which means, can I see myself in my curriculum? right? And so do I know great African American mathematicians? Do I know who they are? Do I know their story, right? Do I have my own voice in this class? Like, can I ask questions? Can I have this space? Can I get some eyeball-to-eyeball contact with a teacher who says that they believe in me? You just need to do your work, right? And so kind of that personal connection is really important. And so what there's been some concerns about as we rolled through year 2 was that we're really focused more on the sense of belonging, right, and being kind of touchy-feely with everybody, and sacrificing that rigorous, high-quality instruction. So we want to be very clear about is that we still have a high standard here at Shorewood High School for rigorous, high-quality instruction. We, in no means, are not doing anybody any good services by compromising that. What we're here to do, though, is make sure that we keep that high-quality instruction, but also improve that sense of belonging. Because as you ask students, and as our research study will show, is that people believe, and I believe that we do have a high-quality, rigorous high-quality instruction occurring. What's difficult for a lot of our students and families is that sense of belonging, and that's being reinforced in all of our data points. And so that's what we're really trying to do. And again, this isn't just about team building, rah-rah, like pep rally type of stuff. Like, this is sense of belonging in the academic work that I'm doing. Like within my math class and within my, 5th grade class. Like, how am I developing as a student, and how is my identity then reinforced positively? So that's a lot of the work that we're doing around race work, but it really then you can see hopefully that it really bleeds into this work, and it really should. So when we're looking at academic mastery, character and citizenship and wellness, then we're really looking to make sure that these two areas are really kind of embedded in what we do. So it's hard work, but we also believe that we can do it here in Leeds. So that's Race Work 3.0 for the 3rd year. So we're excited to continue.
And I'm
that work.
assuming some of the study that was done is going to show that a lack of a sense of belonging impedes your ability to succeed.
Yes, yeah.
So
In the
correlation.
Right. In the sense is, I mean, just in a real example, is that if I were to walk into a setting where I feel like I don't belong, right, and I'm in a rigorous academic setting, right. Now I'm not just using my intellectual bandwidth to follow the teacher in a rigorous setting, but I've got this sense of do I belong? Do I not belong? Like, I'm using some of that intellectual bandwidth for kind of some of those anxieties of sense of belonging. Whereas if we can address that, then we can open up that bandwidth a little bit more and have students be able to focus a little bit better on the work that's being done, if that makes sense. So that's essentially stereotype threat in a nutshell, and what we believe is creating a lot of our gaps, to be honest, within our data. So we're going really hard at that, and our staff has been good about just let's do it. And so we'll be doing some goal setting and then continued professional development. On October 26th, I believe it is, Aaron Winkler from UW Milwaukee will be coming in and doing some continued work with us, talking about development of racial identities in schools, and then specifically strategies for us to be able to use. And then by that point, staff will have identified what strategies they've tried, and so we'll be able to have a nice cross-section of sharing on that day. So that work continues.
So if I could just jump in real quick, could you talk just a little bit about the onboarding and what that process has been like? Because we have had a number of new employees.
Yes.
And now we've got a faculty and staff that's largely very comfortable and well-versed in these discussions.
Yes.
Now that we're going into year 3. And then the challenge is bringing everybody else, maybe not up to the same speed, but informing them. And I know I know last year you worked on it, and I think I asked you this last year, but if you could just fill us in as to how the onboarding went for the new folks.
Yeah, so I would say even before the onboarding, we're also very cognizant of our recruiting and our selection process for staff, right? And so we're looking for people that can do both of these things, that are high quality teachers and can embrace that. So that's certainly coming in, that we believe we want to make sure that we have staff that are either have some experience or are ready to experience that. But formally, to the question of onboarding, so we have used Martha Berry and Paula Pennebaker from the YWCA. So they've done a half-day in-service on the history of race in Milwaukee, and kind of how that influences schools, but more so their expertise is in the race in the community. So that for us has been a great introduction because some people aren't from the area or from out of state. So one, they can learn about our region, but also learn about it through this lens of race and how that boils itself down in the Milwaukee metro area and then Shorewood specifically. So we've spent a half day for all of our new staff going through that in service, and that continues to be great. So both Paula and Martha are great facilitators and continue to help us out with that. And then that then allows us to also offer opportunities for our staff who want to participate in some YWCA in services that they've got some familiarity with Martha and Paula, and Jennifer is also part of the YWCA, who's a resident. So yeah, so that's about as much time as we could spend at the beginning of the year for onboarding, but we do think that there's a direct link then from that work then for staff the very next week then to continue to participate in that full day race work PD. So. All right, so just quickly, some other trainings that we did later in the week. So we also spent a lot of time in buildings going through some nuts and bolts, and then teachers in classrooms. But a couple trainings that we had talked about, I think, last year, just regarding school safety. So the ALICE training, so I just put what the acronym means there. The school shooting training, or school shooting safety tips. So that's something that our administrators have been trained in over the summer to be facilitators at each building, and they went through a half day of some best practices and then a little bit of scenario work with our staff, which got rave reviews from our staff, and most people said it's horrible that we have to do this, but it's really important, and I'm so thankful that we did it, kind of on the backside of it. So I think our administrators did a wonderful job of facilitating that in a safe way, but also pushing the envelope. When you're talking about places like Sandy Hook and Stoneman Douglas High School, I mean, you're talking about really heavy things, and so that training was important, and more so that we have some training to fall back on. So we'll continue to refine that as we go.
So have we sent anything out, or are we going to send anything out to parents that say all teachers participated in this? This is what it's about, so that if they want to have a conversation with their kids about it, they can continue that conversation at home.
Yes. So I have a draft of both some of the trainings and some of the facilities work that we did that I'm going to send out.
Okay.
It's also Safety Week, so parents will be getting some updates on just Safety Week tips and things that are going on in the classrooms also. But I was going to name this specifically because I know there was some interest in the community around this work, or what are we doing around that. So
or if
yeah.
a kid comes home and they have done some sort of practice in school and wants to talk about it, you have to be able to know what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll certainly have that. We're going to be very sensitive to just developmentally, what ages we use this with, and so unfortunately for a lot of these situations, they're so contextual that it's mostly just get to safety. But we wanted to make sure, especially for our staff and our experienced staff that have gone through the evolution of school shooting trainings, there's a lot of old practices that end up proving deadly in some cases because we lock down in place versus just getting out of the room. And so a lot of this is unlearning old practices, unfortunately. So that was a good training. And then so Safety Week is this week. So just going through our drills, just making sure that all of our students and staff kind of know where everything is, and doing that at the beginning of the year was important. So continue to do that. Trauma sensitive schools training. So our counselors were trained in some trauma sensitive school practices. And so that's work that we'll continue to do. We spent a half day as part of our back to school in services, and it really talks about the identification of how trauma manifests itself in different ways with different students, and that's really important, obviously, for our teachers to know, being on the front lines, that because a kid acts up, that might mean 1,000 different things, right? And there might be some traumatic experiences, and so how we handle those things really needs a lot of care. So there's some good training that's gone on around that. So we'll continue that work, and so that was part of our back to school.
With that stuff, Brian, does that end up linking then to some of the wellness screening that we're doing? There's these ACE measures related to trauma. I mean, are we starting to look at how to incorporate that as well as with some of the other wellness evaluations?
Yes, along with the code of conduct
Okay.
and restorative practices, all of that kind of rolled into one. So that'll be the work of the counselors, principals, and then the deans,
Okay.
to be able to really work on that. And again, there's an evolution because we can't do everybody at once.
Right.
But we were able to do the trauma sensitive schools, 3-hour training. That was also part of the school safety grants that we did through the Wisconsin Department of Justice, is to have 3 hours of trauma sensitive care training. So we were able to satisfy that also. So just really quickly, so we did feedback for the week. So one of the questions was overall, I feel the beginning of the year professional development was organized, which is important, and helpful to my practice. So we want to make sure that these are meaningful things that people can take forward. From a scale from unorganized and not helpful to helpful, we had 95.6% of staff say that either on a 3 or 4 that it's organized or helpful to the practice. So felt really good about that, and part of our process of measurement that we're using, just wanted to make sure that we're reinforcing that here. So I think it was a very successful back to school week, and now we're back for our second week of full school. So so it's been, but it's felt good. It's good to see everybody. Good to get back in a rhythm. So all right.
Thanks.
Are there any other further questions on that report? Okay. Next is an update on the African American student research study.
Yeah, so just wanted to bring that to the board. So last year we had commissioned 3 professors from UW-Milwaukee to conduct a research study with our African American students and families. So that research study, the data collection took place last spring and a little bit in the summer. And so what I had asked the researchers for is to be able to get us some preliminary findings for our back to school professional development days. And so that's what I had posted as part of our resources that we used. So what we weren't able to do, just because of one of the professors changed jobs, and just the amount of data that we had, it was a really good response, but it, from as many of you know, from a research standpoint, workload is a lot. So want to make sure that the research study is done right, and so they felt that November would be a good time where they could come and do a full presentation, and worked out in schedules. So that's the time where we'll actually have the 3 researchers here to be able to give a full-blown report of the study. In the meantime, we had 2 of the professors that are still at UWM, Dr. Nagy and Dr. Williams, came and presented to our staff just some preliminary findings. And essentially, I guess in a nutshell, it's really just getting at this idea of sense of belonging, and that students want to be here, but really need more affirmation of their place and belonging here. So we were able to integrate that within our race work professional development, and put that up against some of our data that we had from our school perception survey, and there's fortunately quite a bit of consistency there that we can use to help students move forward. So on the document that I provided, I just gave just a little bit of a summary and some of those slides. And then Pablo, you had also asked about strategies. So some of the strategies that we used and provided for staff are also in that document with the study update. And then the professors will, as part of their report, also be providing some of the recommendations as we're moving forward.
So is Dr. Blakey still part of the research, even though she's moved now to Tulane? So
yes.
She's staying on in the project?
Yes,
Okay.
she's staying on in the project.
Yeah.
She's active in the project, so we're just doing more Skype with her.
Sure.
But she will be back on November 13th
Okay.
for us to be able to provide that.
And I had another question, but I just forgot it.
Well, hopefully if this is all been, implemented well, not only will the students of color who are deeply affected by the sense of belonging, we have 75% of our white students. We have a good portion of our white students also don't feel like they belong. So this is the water that should float all the boats.
Yes, yeah, I think this is a really good example of some high impact research and practices that we can use that again, that benefits everyone, and also beautifully and continued thank you to the board to say it also hits directly on what we're asking for, what our community has asked for us to do. And so we're not only going to be successful here, but we'll be able to see progress on our indicators by board policies. So that for me is great synergy for where we're at. So yes.
I remembered. So in terms of RaceWorks 3.0, are you still working with the researchers at Minnesota, or now is this the district is taking it on and we're using local resources?
Yes, so we've transitioned from our resources from our consultants with Minnesota. So we felt like they provided us with some great framework, you know, to get it off and running. But feedback from our staff was, you know, they were a good resource, but it's really nice to be able to have somebody that I can go down the road with at UWM and be able to talk to her. We can get here without staying overnight and, you know, like that type of thing. So
For an hour.
So is
yes.
and so do you know who that is? So include, you mentioned Aaron Winkler.
Yeah, so Aaron Winkler will be joining us. We're also doing a book study with Dr. John Diamond, who is at UW-Madison. So he's an endowed chair over at UW-Madison in their, I think, Ed Leadership and Public Policy department. So he's written a book called, actually, Despite the Best Intentions, which I think you gave me about 2 months into my job here. So I had a chance to reread that this summer. And there's a lot of synergy between Dr. Diamond's work and research on a similar district in the Midwest in Shorewood, along with Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat. And I just really think that it centers in on what's going on, some of the dynamics that are going on here. And so, yeah, so it'll be beneficial. So really using resources from UW-Madison, UW-Milwaukee, and certainly Dr. McGee and Dr. Williams, you know, will be around too. So really trying, we think between that group of researchers from a university level, along with our resources from the YWCA, and then the local, you know, public library here, who's, you know, had race talks and helped facilitate that we have a pretty good now network that we can just continue to make progress on and have research-based best practices, but also like real dialogue with, you know, with kids and with families and with a community that, you know, continues to struggle and have conversations about areas like the police department, right, and other areas beyond just school. Certainly, that's something that I think over time that we can just continue to develop.
That was going to be my point was, you know, the study. I think it's great that from what I've read in the summary, you're focusing on the school environment and how much people feel they belong here, and I'm wondering how much emphasis the researchers gave to how much people feel they belong in Shorewood. How much of it is the school environment, which we have control over and can control somewhat, versus I got to go into Shorewood, and that's another layer. And because I'm the liaison with Pablo to the Village Human Relations Commission, I think maybe there's a conversation we could have there if there's some data about that.
There is data about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So they'll talk a lot about, again, the sense of belonging, that it is beyond the school, that it's potentially even more so being African American in Shorewood as a village and what that means. That open camp, I mean, a good example is open campus is great, but I don't want to walk the Metro Market, right? Because I know that, I might be followed there, or I might get pulled over, or, you know, that type of thing. So there is some research and that came up in the focus groups. Some of the data that came up in the focus groups, again, the study is very robust, which is also why I didn't want to just rush it to get it done. But that in November, I think it is something that we likely can take to the Human Relations Committee potentially, and to, you know, village trustees, and be able to kind of have a larger community conversation using this research study as kind of a common language and talking point.
And I wonder if that's great, and I'm wondering if there's a possibility to, we don't really have a liaison from the Human Relations Commission to
The diversity work group.
Well, yeah, that would make the most sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but if somebody could come from the HRC, we could invite somebody from the HRC to come to that presentation. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Maybe invite Rebecca.
Yeah, I think we can, as we get a little bit closer to that, we can make
Yeah.
sure that we have the right people in the room. So, yeah, so that'll be planned for November 13th. All 3 researchers should be there, so I just wanted to give you an update on that, because that was
So, if I could just jump in,
Yeah.
So we've seen like 3 of their preliminary findings. In your discussions with them, were there other findings along the lines of curriculum delivery that maybe you were expecting that didn't show up? I'm making, that 3rd finding, high rigor with affirmation from the teacher that the student can achieve and is achieving. Great. Then we're reminded of positive role models, famous forgotten people, and I'm reminded of James Banks, additive multiculturalism, the topology of multiculturalism, which I remember fondly from grad
Right.
school. And I'm just wondering if that's kind of where they stayed, or if they trickled down into the higher topologies.
Yeah, it kind of stayed. I would say stayed there. Again, there's a lot of kind of the analysis that needs to be done with that, but I would say it was students. If it went anywhere, it was also kind of students making sure that we were working on things that they had a voice in, and an opportunity to be able to express who they are within that particular project. Now, certainly like social studies and language arts and some of those academic areas lend themselves more to that. But Aaron Winkler talks a lot about the fact that you can very easily integrate science and math, into these areas, into these areas also. So I would say the study is probably more so kind of bigger picture. This is how students are feeling. It's a validation of student voice. We've heard individual students talk to us about some of these concerns, but the validation of that from a research standpoint, I think, is really important. And they'll provide some strategies. I would say not anything that was just ultra surprising, I guess, because again, we've had some data points from our school perceptions data and conversations with students. But for me, it was just energizing to be able to hear from a solid sample of students, parents, and some alumni, to be able to just say, let's go to work on this, and then to be able to get some strategies in there. So, the other nice thing that I like about the study is just the diversity of the researchers. So, to be able to have somebody from social work, from public health and education, like that provides like a much broader, I think a much more rich resources. And Dr. McGee from public health talks about kind of social indicators of health, right? And that race is being continued to talk about more and more about by insurance companies, right? And so like what the impact of race is having on people's health and how we need to be able to work on that. So again, larger conversations than just education, but I think we've done the researchers have done a good job to be able to get some samples for us and something that we can help not only move our district forward to, which is our work, and we're committed to do that, but hopefully have a larger impact. Yeah, for the community.
So, and then just to follow up, so can we expect you then to, after the November 13th presentation, to then come back to the board with like action steps that you're going to be taking to address some of the issues that they find?
Yes, so by that time, I think we'll be able to have an update on things that we're continuing, that we're doing that would align. But yeah, certainly if there are, once we get to the research and the recommendations, we can solidify,
Okay.
particular actions. So, and that's what I've found to be like most important especially as we're going kind of this boardroom to classroom, is like we need definitive expectations and steps that staff are committing to and that we're supporting through professional development to make progress on these things. Like just kind of talking in generalities isn't gonna do it. Like these are really strong stereotypes that have stood the test of centuries, right, that we're trying to undo, and that we have to be really, really deliberate and directive with what we're doing, along with allowing staff, right, the professionalism, the autonomy to like do the work as it can be done best, which is a personal, face-to-face type of exercise. So there's a
balancing
Yeah,
Well,
there's a definite balance.
And my sense is that there's going to be things that are curricular, kind of getting back to what Pablo was talking about, but, I mean, one of the things that I feel pretty confident that's gonna come up in here is that we need more, adults, teachers of color in this building, and
Correct.
I know Tim's working on it, but, I think that's one of those things that, like, the district actually has, like, some power over
Yeah.
versus what the teachers are doing, and so, just thinking about, like, this is what we're gonna do to address this, and again, thinking differently potentially about how we do those things.
Yes.
And
I
I have
think
to
it's
say, when we had
something.
the teacher breakfast, that it was nice to see how many new teachers we had that were teachers of color. I was very pleased to see that. That was great.
Yeah, we still have work to do, but we are making
Moving in the
progress.
right direction,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Can I just make a scheduling note that I had a thing on my calendar that says that's also the night that school perceptions was coming, so we
That's
want to
true.
make sure that we're not overloading that
Sure.
calendar, or if we do that, we limit it to very little other business, because there's gonna be a lot on this.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and then, we had asked, Brian to schedule and calendar the district work group meetings and presentations for us. And so he, will tell you how we did that.
Yeah, so I made a phone call to my good friend Ted Knight to help develop that. So from a communication standpoint, that's something that came up last year is how do the community members know what's going on in the work groups, how I can get involved in the work group, who's on a work group, that type of thing. So so that was something that we integrated into our website development. And then also just through furthering that conversation, thinking through how can we schedule that into board meetings where we can have just
Updates.
maybe quarterly updates,
Yeah.
not every meeting, but regular updates on what's going on in the work group, so we don't get too far down the road and be like, oh, I didn't know that was going on. So so Ted can present you with that schedule.
Yeah, so a couple of months ago, I think I presented at a previous board meeting, maybe at the start of the summer, about how best to get updates out, communications regarding what our work groups and interest groups were doing on a regular basis. So I'm back here now to, number one, let you know that we now have all of this information up on our website. The information can be found at shorewood.k12.wi.us/workgroups / or you can go to the district menu, which is the first menu on the website, and go down to work groups and interest groups and find the link that way. So at this point, all of the work groups and interest groups are listed on this webpage. If you click on one of the groups, what you see is a brief description, the purpose of the group, as well as the administrative contact for that work group, the frequency of the meetings, and then updates. As we continue to have meetings, we're going to be posting these intermittent updates, and most of them are in PDF format, and they basically present an update from the administrator, who's a point of contact for that particular work group, on the latest happenings within that work group, what's been discussed, what they're working on now, and what the next steps are with regard to what that work group is focused on. So pleased to report we've got those for all of the work groups on this page. And we've also built out a schedule, which each of our administrative team members have contributed to, who are points of contact for these work groups, on when these updates, these communications updates will happen throughout the 2018-19 school year. So that document is linked from the board packet for tonight's meeting. And on that document, there's also a link back to this website, so you can see where the website exists. And basically, it's just a calendar showing when those updates will be shared out and posted on the website. What we're also going to be doing is, as these waves of updates are posted, we are going to be adding news links to our website to direct users to that content. They may not always think to go and check and click on that work group's link, so as the updates are posted, we will also share news items on the homepage to kind of direct users toward that content.
Any questions?
So I've just been bouncing through that website.
Me too.
Do we include like members or the dates of like past meetings? Like, you know, if you look at the diversity work group, you wouldn't know that the group's been around for, you
2
know,
years.
2 years. And I think that would be helpful, just to get a sense of where we were and where we're going. I don't know how others feel, but I guess if I'm visiting this website, I'm clicking on,
Yeah, curious about,
safety
When
work
did it
group.
start?
sure.
And
Easy enough to use
it
it
tells
to
me
add.
the purpose, I click on the update, and it tells me the purpose, there's a few more details. But it would be nice to see, like, you know, not every 3 months, but like when.
Sure.
And, maybe membership, and if people do wanna join, whom do they contact? And, you know, the administrator, presumes, so.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be my suggestion, but
Sure.
I'm glad you have it all up there, that's good.
Great.
And then Brian, we can expect, so if, my plan was originally to put this in our work plan,
Yeah.
which is board policy, and so then we would know when the board would be
When they're gonna
getting
report.
reports.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I think we can maybe just bring that to the
We can
next
make
meeting.
that update, yeah, the next one,
Yeah.
okay.
Great.
Anything else?
Questions?
No, thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
Good.
Thanks very much.
All right, we're on to superintendent's action agenda. I will take a motion for monitoring results 3.
I make a motion that we approve, monitoring, for results 3.
I second.
Okay. Tim?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
So monitoring results R3 is focused on character and citizenship. You know, in the highlights, you're gonna notice that, and actually throughout, whenever we're looking at school perceptions data, we're performing right alongside peer districts. So within the indicators and how they're written is, through yours truly's own fault, is if we fall below the peer district average, we're not in compliance. Even though if you look at where we fell below, it was hundredths of a point below. So it's not within what school perceptions would consider statistical significance.
Right.
Their statistical significance is gonna be a 0.2 of a point below or 0.2 of a point above would be statistical significance. There was some growth, again, from the standpoint of 2017 to 2018. Again, we wouldn't consider those statistical significant growth, but there was some growth. We wanna be careful about saying, hey, that growth was because of everything we've done, because it could be within the variance of annual year-to-year changes. So there are those, as you kind of scroll through each and every one of them, we performed quite well on the indicators as written. And in indicator 3 on our 3.2, you see the passages presentation data again. And then our 3.3, be good stewards of the physical environment, is again making sure that there are experiences at every school that constitute an environmental experience.
Questions?
I only had one question, which is, as we talk about the idea of character and citizenship and the idea of service, and we're doing passages, we're doing pieces where it's applying content to the community, have we given any, and I've asked this question in previous years, but before being on the board or not, have we looked at all at requiring service of all of our students?
Interestingly enough, that is something that is actually coming up at a state level too, in terms of looking at service hours, potentially going into actually the state report card. Is actually kind of the discussion that's floating around. The difficult part, honestly, Joanne, has been what am I looking for? The assessment of that service learning. Going back to at one point in time, part of the graduation requirements at a former district that I used to attend, Green Bay, you had to do 24 hours of community service. What was the assessment of that? Slips of paper that said, how
Check.
much community service did you do? Great,
Somebody
you got
signed
to it, check mark. So the authenticity of that,
Right.
community service work really, I would say, wasn't there as much as I look at a lot of the academic mastery pieces in R 2.2, where we say we want these academic, not just academic mastery, but also the application to have something to do with being within the village, not the village, but within the community. Like, that's where we're gonna get the biggest bang for our buck, is where we're using our academic mastery in conjunction with citizenship and service.
Right, so if we could figure out that, that'd be awesome. And I'm of the opinion that just doing the service, you know, that experience by itself without reflecting on the experience isn't learning.
Right.
It's just experience.
Yep.
So you have to reflect on it, and so we'd have to figure that out. But I'm a big advocate that we figure out a way to do that somehow, that we put that on our radar of something valuable. It's consistent with the stuff that we're trying to do. We talk about, we were trying to raise good citizenships and good citizens, and to me, understanding service is a huge part of that. That's just my perspective.
My sense early on in the passage experience is that we can really hardwire into that.
Correct.
And so as that evolves, that's something we can keep on our radar.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I just like to raise that.
I look at underneath 2.2, sub-point 3, original thinking and voice connecting to the real world issues and formats and creating work that is meaningful to the community beyond the school. Like, that's where we can hardwire that in,
Yeah.
and that's where we look at those passing presentations as, so where did that manifest itself?
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to raise it as
Yep.
something I think we need to do.
So I had a question about, the table on page 6 that's broken down, by our different, categories. So was I wrong that we were gonna do, MAC and traditional as breakouts as well this year?
I didn't have that on the report as
Oh, okay.
written, so I didn't provide that.
Okay.
So,
But we were,
right, so for the academic report, so coming up in October.
Oh, okay, so not for character incident, okay. I
Right,
just wanted to.
for the academic reports, so it's coming up.
Yes.
Okay,
There'll be data on MAC versus
Yes.
single.
so probably moving, well.
In
So
October.
that's for
forward,
next
might we
time.
wanna,
Yeah.
yeah, so then we wanna
I
put
mean, I
that
guess we
in
should
place
just,
going
I like to
forward.
keep things consistent, so.
Yep.
Okay.
So you're suggesting next year we have it broken up here?
An additional
Well,
category,
gotcha.
yeah.
Another
Uh,
question I have is, not on.
There you
are. You know, being new to the board, this is good to see, things moving in a good direction from 2017 to 2018 on almost all these indicators, and wherever it is relative to the comparative averages, but we have, within school, we have moved in a positive direction. So I think that's good, and again, we aren't exactly sure why. If we have the data, I would just say for next year, just keep adding on to those.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, that's
Is it
the
only
plan.
that we have 2017 or
Correct.
2018?
We only have we only started school perceptions of 2017.
Yeah.
Okay,
Keep running
perfect.
So
data.
that was our baseline data. We continue to move that table
So
over,
we just be running data.
probably, and again, I take your direction in this, but possibly 5 years, then start to.
Yeah, we'd really like to see like,
Yeah.
multiple data points, so great, okay.
Okay, so we'll talk about changes we wanna see next, but, that is the, notes for this particular report. Are there any other discussions or questions? All right, I have a first and a second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. All right, Tim, I'll let you talk through your, suggestions first. and
Super
then
straightforward.
We'll talk about it.
No, thank you, I appreciate it. So, as I looked through this one and kind of building off of some of the work that Brian mentioned at the start. So as I looked at 3.1, be ethical people treating others with respect. So trying to take the essence of what the board was saying there and understanding that it was last year that I actually came to you with what my interpretation of the indicators were, as well as the interpretation of what the board was. So I want to own that there's a little bit of a reflective piece by myself on this as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so looking at be ethical people treating others with respect, I had sat down with a group of stakeholders and identified individual questions within school perceptions without knowing that they actually did a comprehensive analysis of indices that build into those. And so as I look at the indices, which is a number of questions within school perceptions that build to a common thread, and as I look at be ethical people treating others with respect, the indices, and again, school perceptions puts these titles on, so whether they line up all the same or not necessarily the case. If you look at R 3.2, you'll see citizenship, which you'd be like, well, wouldn't that be where the indices of citizenship would fall? But if you look at the questions underneath citizenship, they get to the idea of be ethical people, treating others with respect, right? And so as I look at kids are answering, do they work well with other students? Do they help others when they see a need? Do they help their friends make good choices? That's what we're talking about, being ethical people and treating others with respect. And so my feeling was, if we can look at that indices, what it allows us to do is not only get an overall score, but also gives us a series of questions that we can always be working on at a school level, at a teacher level, and as a district level, to be able to say, hey, yes, we performed above average on all of them, but the highest one is our celebration, and the lowest one is where we can aim our work to continue to always improve.
Well, and you can read those questions, and if I'm a teacher, I can look back and say, gee, how can I address some of these things in my classroom, and say, when we talk about planning, let's talk about what that means. What is goal setting? What is, being organized? And so you can kind of pull them back into incorporating them into coaching.
Absolutely, and that's a game changer.
Yeah.
Like that's what I've noticed
Right.
more this year than any other year that we've done this, is that connection,
Yeah.
that boardroom to classroom, very practical,
Yeah.
step-by-step things that we can really
Yeah.
draw that line in.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that the other key piece that Dr. Davis noted is, as I look through, and I call them questions, they're actually statements, I should have said statements on the survey, but those are aspirational statements. Those are things that we want students to be able to walk away from, so it's more of a, hey, this is what we want, rather than this is what we're hoping that you don't do. It's
Right.
more of, this is what we're hoping that we can
Go this way.
get to.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's 3.1. As you look at, which deals with the citizenship side of things, as you look at 3.2, kind of what I noticed as we went through 3.2, contributing to a better world by applying their knowledge and skills to improve communities through citizenship and service, it seems somewhat like a copy of that third point in 2.2. And what we're somewhat missing within the character and citizenship then is the character piece. And so one of the ones that we looked at school perception, another indices that we looked at within school perception is the idea of drive. And so as you look through the questions that go into the drive indices, you're looking at academic characteristics that we're looking for, again, in an asset-based model. Not that that's going to be the only thing that we look at. That's in addition to the citizenship, in addition to the wellness, in addition to the academic mastery. Just having drive in and of itself is not going to get you to where we need to be all the time. We need to use that in conjunction with our other indices. And then lastly, if you want me to keep going.
The only thing I have to say that I don't like the word drive. I don't know why I don't like the word. I don't have the thesaurus in my head isn't giving me a better word, but it's just not a word that I'm really.
Yeah, I also don't know, I don't know if drive is getting at character. I mean, it is a characteristic of a student, but I don't think that's what we were.
It's more like resilience or persistence or.
But that's also not necessarily character.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that's what we were talking about.
Right.
That could be a whole other indicator, but I think when we were talking about character originally, it was
more ethical.
Yeah, or I don't know, be kind, have fun, like that, embodying the school motto type thing. Yeah, that's the part that seems like a little bit of a disconnect. So I don't know what the other. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and indices are great, but I'm not sure it's capturing the same thing.
Absolutely. and I can look at others, I think the key piece is what I used was the titles. I mean, if it's just a title being an issue, we can change the title and still utilize the data,
Right.
but if it's, we're missing what the board is asking for, like, that's something that I need feedback on
Right.
so that we can make sure that we have indices that meet what the board is asking.
Well, and for whatever reason, my mic is not working, but I agree with you, Tim, that when we did these initially, way back when, Peru, think about it, before you were on the board,
Yeah.
I mean, in your defense, a
Mhm.
lot of what we thought we wanted, trying to actually create an indicator and then measure it, didn't necessarily go. So this is a work in progress, and that's, oh, thanks, Pablo. You know, it's a work in progress, and so I think we just have to be comfortable to keep tweaking this, and that's fine. I don't have any issue with that, but it
Yeah,
is
no, I don't
finding
either.
out what's gonna be workable.
But I do think, I mean, I think that it's the board's responsibility to agree to the indicators that the district comes up with. And so I think the thing that, and maybe we just need to sit down during our retreat and think about, like, what did we
Focus
mean
in
by
on here a little
citizenship
bit.
and character again?
Yeah.
I think these are great questions, but I don't think that's what originally we were thinking.
agree.
And so maybe we also have evolved now, 2 years later, into what we want to see, so.
But we've got a board
Absolutely.
retreat coming up, so maybe.
Yeah,
Sounds
so
like
I
great
appreciate
retreat
that.
work.
Yeah.
And we can spend
Yeah.
some time
Yeah,
together working
absolutely.
through it,
Yeah.
But that, I mean, and that's really good feedback. Again, these are all suggestions,
Right.
these are, so, that sort of feedback is great for me to be able to go back and make it
Right.
work and make this be what the board is asking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last one, our 3.3, be good stewards of the physical environment. I know this has been a little bit of a struggle of how do we measure this? The one piece that I did want to bring up within OE11 is that as we did align with NGSS, as is required within the operational expectations of the board, that we do align with standards. The Earth and Space Science Standard does have subcategories of history of the planet Earth, roles of water in Earth's surface processes, weather and climate, biogeology, which comes up as a red line, by the way, if you type that in Word. So, natural resources, natural hazards, human impacts on Earth systems, and global climate change. And so knowing that that is important for the board, I also want it noted that that's already an operational expectation, that we make sure that we are teaching good stewardship of the environment within our science curriculum.
Right, and then we had the same problem with this, right?
Right.
That we know
What
we're
it-
teaching it, but
right.
then
What are
we don't have any,
actually-
like, indicators that the students are actually practicing it.
Right.
Correct.
And so, but again, I think we'll bring this one back to, I was gonna ask about board retreat agenda items, so,
There's two of them.
so, there we go,
We're full.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, are there other, I'll note this for the retreat agenda, but are there other things about character and citizenship that I should note for the meeting? Okay. Okay, thanks, Tim. Stay put. I will take a motion for approval of monitoring for results 4.
I move that we approve monitoring result 4.
Second.
Okay, go ahead.
So, similar to result 3, we see a consistent performance on some of our school perceptions data indicators when we talk about this one, which was when I feel stressed, I know how to cope, I'm able to get through challenging times, there's at least one adult in my school that I can talk to about a personal problem, as well as the physical health questions of I have a healthy lifestyle, I get enough sleep, and I exercise at least 3 times per week. I do think it's important that the district, and this has come up on a few news stations quite honestly, that our students are getting enough sleep, and that's really important, and that is through some dedicated efforts of moving some of the start times back a little bit, which is difficult, quite honestly, for high schools to do, having been at a few different high schools. So I do applaud the district and its stakeholders for making that move, and I think that is important in terms of student wellness. So I do want to celebrate that, that is coming out also in the student perceptions of that kids are actually getting enough sleep, and that's really important. From an analysis standpoint, you're going to see basically the same table that we presented in OE10 in July, and some of the discrepancies by race in particular for our referral data that is presented in our 4.1.
Questions?
Mine is a comment more, and it's what we spoke about earlier, which is the idea of identifying and managing stress, managing the emotions. We're looking at that through an extraordinarily narrow lens when we do referrals. We're looking only at the extreme, and we're not looking at, really what we're hoping for is for students to be emotionally healthy and to be able to navigate difficult circumstances. And that's a piece we have to do across the board. And if we target only kids that have referrals, we're dealing with really the most extreme manifestation of difficulty and not the everyday piece. And so I think we have to change the lens that we look for that. Same thing, that board to classroom reference. So there's a lot of theme we have here, I think.
I have a question about the R 4.3. So can you remind me, does Youth Risk Behavior Survey ask a question that specifically gets at avoiding behavior versus, because this question about has anybody offered you an illegal drug doesn't get at did you take it, right? Because that would be the question I want to know, like, right?
I don't have the youth risk behavior survey.
Yeah, that's fine.
We could certainly look back at that. I think if I can recall correctly, as we've looked at understand and avoid risky behaviors, the group literally looked around and said, blank drugs and rock and roll, and we're not asking a question on rock and roll.
Yeah.
So how do we get at these other pieces? And so that was the one that we kind of came up with when it came to drugs.
So I remember that there were a number of questions around drinking and sexual behavior on there that might actually be now in retrospect, but we can talk about that, I guess, for the next one. Okay.
Yep.
I think what's encouraging actually is we're getting we're kind of crystallizing a direction, which is what we've been trying to do, so I think that's good.
Okay. Are there questions about this one and before we move on to changes that you'd like to see for the next one? Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Okay, so I'll let you start again, Tim, on your recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just start with next steps on that one as well.
Sure.
Because we do have some significant next steps from our wellness work group that we've shared a few times, but it bears worth repeating, of looking at an SSIS screener at our elementary levels for social and emotional behaviors that might pop up for students, as well as the game screener, which is supported by DPI and suggested by DPI at the 8th and 9th grade levels in order to identify students who might need a little bit more help and be able to provide that help through our counseling services with them. So those are things that the mental health work group worked on last year. So it's important to note that those are next steps and significant next steps that are happening in terms of differences from last year to this year. So that's important to note. For the suggestions for considerations, as you heard Dr. Davis talk about, one of the things that, as I looked at the wellness, and I know this has been something that we've kind of had rolling in our heads and struggling with a little bit, is quite honestly, as I read through them, a lot of the indicators, and again, this is coming from the lens of, hey, we tried to do this last year and give you the best that we could. A lot of them ended up really coming out from a deficit model and not necessarily hitting all students, but rather hitting a specific certain number of students, which means not all of our teachers can connect to that wellness policy that our board's asking for. So what we talked about is, instead of focusing on how how unwellness manifests itself, let's talk about how we ensure kids can be well, which, as you can see, and Dr. Anderson put within that first paragraph, the youth risk behavior assessment actually says students' connectedness is one of the strongest things that you can do in order to avoid risky behaviors. So really using that connectedness piece, and when students feel connected at school, oftentimes that means the avoidance of a lot of risky behaviors that are mentally, physically, socially and emotionally where students would go to cope. So kind of going up a level with the wellness so that every teacher and every staff member can access Our wellness policy would be to focus on connectedness, which again is an indices that school perceptions allows us to do. I did give kind of a suggestion for what that could look like in terms of 4.1 would be positive and productive relationships with adults. 4.2 being involved in the school beyond just the school day, which we all know is important and is already in our wellness as it stands. And then creating a sense of belonging, and there's about 3 questions from our student perception survey that get at student belongingness. Those 5 questions from school perception survey actually build to the connectedness indices that I talked about that is somewhat powerful because it allows us to consistently focus on continual improvement.
Can we also search for some of the language or questions or, phrasing that might have to do with also communication and ability to express? So those pieces, because to me that's really what wellness is, right? It's that feeling of belonging, the connectedness, and then being able to manage the communication piece when there is an issue, right? So it's how do you resolve it when there is something happening that's not great, right? Are you skilled and adept, or are you going to struggle? And I think there, if I remember, and I haven't looked at the survey for a while, but I think there are some pieces in there about, right, I know how to convey, express my feelings, product, whatever. But we can look for something
I can look
like
for that, absolutely.
No, I think this is a positive step, because I do think we've, like you said, struggled with this as well, and have been coming back to it given what's going on with the wellness group. So
Right.
I really like the new model of being affirming and looking for positive behaviors. So I think I'll just add this to the agenda for the retreat, and we can work on it then.
Okay.
Right. So that's
Great.
looking at, do we
Anything else?
find those on the
Right now?
survey, right?
No?
Effectively expressing and managing emotions.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
And then one more, I'll take a motion for monitoring of operational expectation 4.
I move that we approve operational expectation 4.
Second.
Thanks, Brad. Okay.
Okay, Pat.
Log on either.
By the way,
Sure.
at first when I saw this was like 25 pages, I was like, what? Okay, now I see.
It's 25 pages.
Yeah.
Sorry about it, it's all Tim's fault. I'm gonna ask Tim to stay up here with me since, in operational expectation 4, there is, professional development, stuff like that Tim does, so, I'll ask him to stay up here just in case there are some questions that I cannot answer.
Okay.
You have the report in front of you, some of the highlights, from 4.3, while we're still out of compliance, and this is in relation to having our teaching staff represent
Right.
our students with regards to ethnicity. We're still a bit out of compliance, but we are making progress towards that goal. Something for which it's important for us to continue to strive for that. 4.9, the district is continuing to hit its marks regarding employee evaluations and in the connection of teacher SLOs with our 2 academic mastery themes. And finally, in the highlight area, the staff continues to show high teacher engagement in that 88% believe they have flexibility to do their job in the way that they think is most effective, and 89% feel supported by leadership when they make a decision. They feel make a decision of the staff they feel are in a school environment that allows them to work in an environment of professional support and courtesy. Sorry. I think very good highlights in the area of personnel administration. We do have some areas that I think we need to work on and some changes that we have made. In 4.2, one of the things that we've added is the National Sex Offender Registry to all volunteer checks for the 18-19 school year. Previously, all of the volunteer work is done, or coordination is done through the rec department. Previously, they were checking the Wisconsin Sex Offender Registry. It's not that the Wisconsin registry is inferior. It should be noted that out-of-state offenders are required to register in the Wisconsin registry within 10 days of entering the state to either take up residence, begin school, employment, or employment opportunities. We just felt that it would be a good practice, since we use the national registry in the business office with regards to hires, that we also add that for volunteers. Also, just so that you know, when we do background checks for volunteers, if we see anything that is of concern that comes up in the Wisconsin Circuit Court check, we will also run a Department of Justice background check on those folks as well. DOJ background check is a little bit more thorough. It is more expensive. CCAP is a free, it's not kind of a nice screener. But we will run something that's a little bit more thorough if we have anything that comes up as a red flag.
Pat, what are our costs typically in terms of running background checks?
A background check is depending upon the agency, $7 to $12 a check.
Okay. We do that for volunteers as well.
Yep.
We run CCAP checks for volunteers, and then we run the National Sex Offender Registry. And if we see anything,
And those are
free.
Those are free.
And if we see anything that comes up on those, then we will defer to a more thorough background check. It does not happen very often.
Okay.
But when it
That's
comes,
comforting.
when it does come to full-time employees,
Oh, yeah.
we do the Department of Justice check. Which is always, just a funny aside, it's always a little frightening when you get into the later part of the summer. You can tell a lot of hiring is going on because the background checks take a little bit longer. And you're just
Because there's very,
Everybody's in,
yeah.
Going to operational or OE 4.3, we are not in compliance with this one, but I do want you to know that often vacancy requirements are in process for candidates that either concluded their education or are moving from out of state to an in-state license. So in our instance this year, the 2.4% is equivalent to one new hire that we are waiting for their licensure to be approved by DPI. So it's not like we're hiring 5% of our hires or 6% of our hires are not licensed.
It's just a timing issue.
It's a timing. And that particular area in DPI, since the changes were made in licensure, I think they lost 4 staff people, and I don't think they had more than 6 or 8 staff people to begin with.
Oh.
And so this process continues to be a lengthy process. 4.4, employee appendix acknowledgements are on track for the 18-19 school year. You can see when we got our appendices updates out this last year, we did have a lot of work to do on our appendices updates. But just so you can see the highlights there, once we got the appendices highlights out, we did get 100% of the employees to sign a return acknowledgements. That happened for teacher and custodial maintenance. Aide, clerical, and manager appendices are on the superintendent's consent agenda tonight. And I also have a recommendation coming up in the next portion, reflection.
Okay.
In 4.8, and this is, if you look at the indicators, indicator 1, which talks about the teaching staff salaries and benefits being in the upper third. I will say that this indicator is impacted by our fairly experienced teaching staff. Likewise, indicator 2 is somewhat a factor of the longevity of principals in neighboring districts. So we have, over half of our teaching staff would be considered an experienced educator, and half of our principal staff is
Junior.
compared to our neighboring districts. And I will say in indicator 4 under 4.8, this continues to be difficult to collect the data that's requested. This is also brought up in my reflection. One of the comparisons is to compare our benefits to that of private companies. Private companies are not required to publish their data, so it makes it, I say it a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I mean, I can call the cost corporation and say, so can you tell me what your benefits are so I can, do some comparisons, and they are under no obligation to provide that information for me. Also, even just comparing the benefits within schools, the plan designs vary greatly. I mean, we have out-of-pocket expenses anywhere from, I believe, $500 to $14,000, depending upon what school district, what their plan design is. Do they have HSAs? Do they have HRAs? What's the level of contribution with their HRA? So to do these comparisons it's a very challenging process, and the other business managers, HR directors in the greater Milwaukee area, we share this information with one another, but again, even amongst our group, we've had many conversations about how difficult it is to compare these plans, simply because the plan designs are so specific. It gets very difficult. So
I think the intent was to try and make sure that we're competitive with peer districts. I think private companies, we should just remove from the consideration, because we're not going to, if we're losing teachers to private companies, they're leaving teaching. Right, so we're not going to compete with that. If we're losing teachers to other districts because we're not competitive, that's a different issue.
And that's coming up in the reflection portion.
So, I have a question, and I guess this is probably something that I'll want to see changed maybe more, but the indicators about the racial makeup and the gender, the way we're calculating this doesn't make sense, because really, like for example, the percentage of Asian students dropped and the number of faculty stayed the same, but it appears as if our difference is smaller. So I don't want this driven by our student enrollment. I want this driven by the teachers, the number of teachers we have, and probably the change in teaching staff. Same thing with gender. So I don't know, this I think it's just not getting at exactly what we were looking for. So we can talk about that for the next one. And then I had a question about the salaries. So I guess I agree with you that the experience of our teachers and our administrators is going to be different than other places. But is this, I guess I don't know, what's the S-Site data analytics? And then what is that? 5-Site.
5-Site?
Yeah.
What 5-Site analytics does is they take all of the information that's reported to DPI and they put it into essentially a tool that gives districts the ability to run comparisons on almost an astonishing level. So for example, every year we have to report it's called the DPI 1202 report. We have to report information on our staffing, information on our salaries, information regarding licensure and whatnot. in years past, that information has gotten sent up to DPI, and while the DPI website does have that data available, if we wanted to use that data in any way to compare one district to another, we literally had to pull each district up by itself, extrapolate that data manually, and put it back into some type of a format where we could compare it. What I have the ability to do now is to set the parameters as to what I want to look at. For example, I can look at average teacher salary, and I can pull up anything from a single district snapshot to a comparison of Shorewood with the entire state of Wisconsin.
So can you, within that, then also say, I want average teacher salary for teachers with greater than 15 years of experience?
Right. Yeah, you can drill down into.
I mean, so then we have so I guess what I'm saying then is that one of the things we might want to do is when we use the word, I don't know, comparison, is to think about finding districts, or, and it doesn't even have to be districts, but other teachers within maybe some geography that we've determined.
Correct for, yeah.
Or some other kind of,
Cost
right,
of
comparison
living
group,
kind of
right,
thing.
where then we can say like,
Right.
right, like what are they making?
Right.
Subject matter.
So that it's just a better comparison, because it does feel like when you say that our administrators are in the bottom 20%, you know, okay, maybe compared to, you know, Whitefish Bay and Nicolay and those places, but not maybe compared to other people who are at the same, yeah.
Right,
Right, it's
So.
years of experience.
that's the relevant.
Well, I
piece
think it's
there.
And actually
it's
with
probably
the-
actually multiple factors, but it sounds like this 5-site would allow you to probably pick on some of.
Evaluate that.
Yeah.
Right, and I can ask them to actually develop some additional analytics for us that can possibly disaggregate that information. So I do have a meeting scheduled with 5-site. I believe it's in 2 weeks, so I can talk to them. I'm also going to be going to the 5-site National Convention, where I can work with some of their engineers to.
I know.
It's just down in Chicago,
Sorry.
so it's like,
I was like, that's a party.
you guys hired me, so. That's what we do. We
I
get
know.
together and we
I
talk
know.
about
Talk about-
how can we pull this data
how can we
apart
analyze
better
this?
so that we can, you know.
Yeah, I think it's awesome, Patrick.
I think this is a question for Tim. So, what's the Charlotte-Danielson framework?
Yes, I was gonna ask this.
Charlotte-Danielson framework is the framework that we use to evaluate our teachers, and
Who's Charlotte-Danielson?
Charlotte-Danielson is a wonderful researcher on effective ways to evaluate teachers. It came up probably about 5 years ago that DPI recommended either the Charlotte-Danielson method or what's called the Strong method, which is popular in the Oshkosh area, I believe.
Correct.
And
Well,
so
then we don't
most
wanna
of the rest of the state utilizes the
Let's get into that, yeah.
Charlotte-Danielson method. The Charlotte-Danielson method breaks your teacher evaluation down into 4 categories of preparation, how you're preparing, what your classroom environment is, what your instruction is, and then your professional responsibilities. Within those, there's subcategories that you can actually have discussions about. Prior to Charlotte-Danielson, oftentimes what we had as districts were very broad topics. So you would evaluate a teacher on their instruction. It's good, right? And so what Charlotte-Danielson does is break it down a
What does
little
that
bit more
mean?
into
Right.
5 or 6 areas that you can talk about. And again, similar to kind of the indices discussion, you always have areas that you can say, this is my next step that I need to work on, here's what I'm strong with, those sorts of pieces. It is a lot of work on teachers
Holy
and
cow.
principals.
So the principals are responsible for all the teachers in their building?
They're responsible for all the teachers. What we do for an evaluation cycle is the first 3 years that you are within district, you are on what's called summative evaluation, where your principal will actually go through and evaluate you on every component within the Charlotte-Danielson framework. After that, you go on a 3-year cycle. So you're off, on. But every teacher, every year does a student learning outcome, an SLO, that's based off of academic mastery. And what's called a PPG, or a personal professional goal, which is something
Like a
that teachers
self-assessment.
oftentimes are saying, here's what I need to work on. We've been aligning that with our character and citizenship and wellness work, and kind of focusing in on connecting it. So what are you going to do in order to connect with our students more? So as you look at Brian's kind of teacher goals, that's where we're getting down to. Let's make sure we focus on academic mastery, and we focus on connectedness. Focus on those two pieces that Club Steele says will help.
And I'm on the site looking at this Charlotte Danielson, and it is, like, this is a lot. Do we ask our teachers to consider, I mean, do they do some self-assessment in the off years so that they're just kind of paying attention to their own continuous growth?
Yeah, we had a really great discussion with our principals this year about what that looks like in the off years. So again, you're gonna be meeting with the principal no matter what about your SLO and PPG.
Okay.
The other piece of this is that, so you're getting, this is fun. So domains 2 and domains 3 are what you would see. Domains 2, I'm sorry,
Classroom
instruction, and
environment.
domain 3,
Yeah.
classroom environment.
Mhm.
I have those backwards, but that's okay.
Right.
Are what you see within an observation. So while you're observing the teacher, you are collecting what we would call artifacts
For those
on
students.
those components. Planning and preparation and professional responsibilities are not something that you're going to see in an observation. So it's something that we ask the teachers to provide artifacts for.
Okay.
So even in your off years, we are asking teachers to provide at least
Okay.
3 artifacts that provide
Okay.
some insight to their planning and preparation or their professional responsibilities.
Okay.
So 3 their first off year, 3 their second off year, 3 their on year, they get 9 total, and then they reflect on all of them.
And I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, but I'm assuming in kind of grade level or departmental kind of meetings, these are the kinds of conversations that they would have peer-to-peer to try and be helpful, supportive, whatever.
To be honest with you, it's probably more that those so what I have found most powerful is my ability as an evaluator to have a really good conversation with my teachers on specific focus areas,
Okay.
rather
Struggling
than
with
just
this.
an abstract, let's talk about your instruction, right?
Okay.
A teacher can come in and say, you know what, I really need to work on asking better questions.
Okay.
Let's dive into that and look at the descriptors and how we can help you become a better
Prompting,
formative
right.
assessment question asker. I would say probably more so your departments and grade levels are gonna be looking at that SLO PPG
Okay.
piece of the academic mastery and the
Okay.
connectedness, more so than dissecting that 4 domains.
This is really,
It's
okay.
really, that's really kind of guiding the conversation between
Okay.
evaluator and teacher.
I would say we also get some good support through the mentoring program though,
Oh,
too, right?
absolutely.
So
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
something for our new
Okay.
staff, valuable for our new staff, also valuable for our staff, experienced staff who become mentors,
Right.
to be able to be really well versed in
Fluent
this.
with
So
this,
that's where a lot of
yeah.
that, from
How to be
peer-to-peer
evaluated.
standpoint, I think that's
Yeah,
probably our
and
most
that's-
effective conversation.
And with the sunset of the PDP, that DPI used to have, which was how you kept your license. So with that going away, our mentors were able to stop focusing on helping new teachers get through their PDPs and start
All
focusing
the same
on
thing.
that. So
Nice.
that's really where our mentor-mentee focus
Okay.
has become.
okay.
And then are the principals also the ones who do the non-licensed personnel
Yes.
evaluations?
Yep.
Okay.
And that one was just a little bit of this year was primarily a little bit of a hiccup in the library aides and one other aide that we
Wasn't evaluated.
evaluate.
Okay, any further questions about the current monitoring report? No? Okay. I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. All right, so recommendations for changes for next year? You wanna go ahead and start, Pat?
Sure. So I've got 2 indicators that I'd like to look at some adjustments for next year. In the executive summary, I have 4.4-1, which currently says by the 1st of December for each fiscal year, 95% of the district employees have signed and returned their acknowledgement form to affirm they have received updated handbook and applicable appendices, policies from the district business office. And I'd like to change that to 95% of the district employees have returned an acknowledgement form to affirm they have received updated handbook and applicable appendices, policies from the district business office before accepting their initial contract contract renewal or beginning work in the new fiscal year.
What
So,
a concept, right? Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
a meaningful piece of information as opposed to a random date.
correct.
Yeah.
well, and understand, I don't believe that our former policy of having that done by the 1st of December isn't necessarily that far off, but I think this is tighter.
Well, and you also do hire sometimes during the course, so
Correct.
this then deals with that rolling possibility of bringing
Correct.
on new people.
Correct.
I think that's great.
And so I just told that or some other information, it will assure that contract employees are acknowledging the receipt of their handbook appendices prior to accepting the contract, and that hourly employees are acknowledging the receipt of their handbook appendices prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year. Since they don't have contracts, we have to pick some time in that beginning of the fiscal year, just as a wonderful time in the business office.
Right, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then under board indicator 4.8 dash 4, currently it asks the district is within the top 33% in the least amount of employee out-of-pocket benefit contributions, both single and family, as compared to companies and school districts regionally. And I would like to change that to the district is within 10% of the average amount of employee out-of-pocket health insurance benefit contributions, both single and family, as compared to school districts regionally. Essentially what we're doing is we're taking out that 33% and getting to more of an average, which is going to allow for a broader comparison over a variety of plan designs. And then it's eliminating the private companies that
Doesn't make any sense
are
anyway.
required to, post or.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, the only other ones that I mentioned were 4.3, indicators 2 and 3, kind of just changing how you present that, and then, I guess considering maybe rewording if we can get different data from 5-Site,
On some of that salary
on some of the salary.
comparisons, yeah.
I think the indicators are probably gonna be the same, but I think maybe,
The data.
defining what comparison means better.
Right, and I just jotted down some information, like I said, I'll work on that, when I see, our other representative geeks from the data analytics side of the world, so.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if I could just propose a little
Okay.
verbiage change, so where OE4 reads the board values individuals employed by the school district of Shorewood, adding at the end of the sentence, which, it says superintendent shall assure the recruitment, employment, development, evaluation, and compensation. I was wondering how the board felt about adding, because I think we do it already, but it's something that we want to make sure that we keep doing, and we may want to have some indicators for, but the professional treatment. And in my own research of what helps retain quality teachers, it's being treated like professionals. I think on the consent agenda, we're going to be approving some handbooks. And that it looks like you've worked collaboratively on those with folks. That type of thing would be something you may interpret and use as an indicator, but I would like to be very kind of upfront about placing and being very obvious about what we're trying to do, which is not just recruiting, employing, developing, evaluating, but also treating professionally, which I think in this day and age is not always the case, but I think that's something we pride ourselves on, and my suggestion would be to add it in there, but that's my
So
suggestion.
this on page 3, the,
This is the gray box on OE4 on page 3.
Yep.
so after evaluation, professional,
Well, or just say, blah, 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 district employees in a professional manner necessary to enable the district to achieve its results policies.
The wordsmith. There you go.
My friend.
Did you get that, Patrick?
Yeah, I've got a note here.
Okay.
Simple.
okay. Anything else? right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Okay, we have a superintendent's consent agenda. I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the superintendent's consent agenda.
Second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Iris isn't new to the district, correct?
She's been working with us, right?
Yeah. Great.
Doing a nice job.
Welcome.
Yes.
that's
Okay,
good.
Yeah.
public comment number 2.
Hi, Emily Berry, 1304 East Lake Bluff Boulevard. I just had a quick couple of things about, first on the work groups. I definitely welcome the additional information now that's posted about the work groups. But I think I'd echo some of what Dr. Muir had suggested would be nice to add and in the spirit of transparency. If not legal compliance, if your legal counsel doesn't feel it's necessary, I still feel like, in the spirit of transparency, there's a couple things that would be useful, I think, for anybody trying to understand how decisions are getting made in the district. The first is to clarify, and I think on a few this might already be sort of indicated, which groups include members of the public versus which are staff only, because I think those are very different types of work groups. So the RTI committee, for instance, like, you know, if there's nobody from the public on that, like, then it seems like the, you know, general understanding of the mission of that group and maybe what they're working on is totally sufficient for somebody in the public like me. But a work group like the wellness work group that includes members of the public potentially, I don't know, it's hard to tell really. It would be good to know how one might attend the meeting, if they are open, what the agendas are, again, the days that they meet, just to know, like, for instance, if I wanted to get a message to someone, or even to Dr. Anderson prior to the work group's next meeting, it would be helpful to know what days they meet, even if I'm not allowed to sit in that meeting. And again, I think Dr. Muir had said a list of work group members seems like it would be in order, at least for the ones that do include members of the public, not just the accountable administrator. I think that's important for a couple reasons. One is just to know what the qualifications for those people are, who chose them, did the board appoint them, how long are their terms, if they're serving, are they just at the pleasure of the administrator who's running them, and I think just, you know, as a parent, as a volunteer, it'd be great to know, you know, how one applies to be on that work group, what are the qualifications you're looking for, is anyone screening those work groups for conflicts of interest? Like, for instance, if you're a local therapist and you're on the wellness committee, like, is anyone checking to, like, make sure that those kind of conflicts are addressed? It also wasn't indicated if on any of those meetings the board members attend any of those, or what kind of, if there's any kind of reports out other than just to the full board at the board meetings. So ideally, it would be great to see minutes and agendas for those work groups where they're not just staff members. There are a lot of them. And then I guess one overriding question would be, maybe this is a question for your retreat, is what prompts creating a work group, and at what point do you say their work is done? Because there's a lot now. There's like 14 groups if you include the fact work team as a sort of quasi work group. That's a lot of quasi committees. So it would just be great to have clarity. So, but again, I think that what is on the website now is a great start, and I appreciate that additional information, and welcome that. So, the other little thing I was going to mention is just as you discuss the character value of drive, I guess one concern concern I have is in defining it by the statements or questions on that school perception survey. Some of those had to do with, I think it said, like the statement was, my classes are challenging. And I guess a couple things about that. One is I think for some kids, they're, you know, they may be able to certainly find challenging classes most of the time, but sometimes you just have to take the class because it's required and that's what fits in your schedule. So I just want to be careful with that. Like it seems like probably on average that's a good indicator in general. You want kids choosing challenging classes. The other thing though is that it'd be good if, you know, when you're thinking about these to sort of cross-reference with the trauma-sensitive schools training. There may be kids for whom surviving high school is challenging enough, and I would just hope that you would think about those kids as you're thinking about your overarching goals, that for some kids getting by is a huge accomplishment. You know, if you're dealing with something like changing your gender identity in high school, or you're an African American student who doesn't feel that you belong, like maybe that's enough, and you know, constantly challenging yourself academically is, I don't want to say that's too much to ask because you want to have like high expectations for everyone, but I think just keep in mind as you're, you know, setting the character ideals that you really think about the various backgrounds and places that every kid is coming to, because I think, you know, for my kids who grew up in total privilege, like those are totally, you know, those would fit with what I expect as a parent, but I know that not every kid is coming from that place. So I just hope you'll, you know, think that through as you're thinking about like the character ideal of a Shorewood student. That, you know, there's just a wide variety of experiences. So I think you will, but just want to bring that up. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank
I just want to make one clarification about, and I think I sent this to you in an email, all work groups are district owned and district operated, so they're not board committees, but the only committee that is the board committee is the facilities advisory community team. So the idea that there would have to be postings for that and all that doesn't apply because it's, the board is not, it's not the boards. So just to be clear, they're not committees. And that the work group is determined by the work that has to get done in the district. So there are a lot of them, but it isn't, but I think the titles of them are, I think, because we've been doing all that work. And so just to be, one of the things that we wanted to do, thanks to, I think in part, your questions about it, is to be much more clear about all the work that is happening in the district.
Right.
Around all those issues. So they've been meeting, and like, this isn't new necessarily, so
Sure.
it may seem like we've added more, but we haven't, it's just that
Sure.
we've named them.
Yeah.
But they are district, like, they are Brian's responsibility, and he creates them and runs them, if they're not coming from the board. So.
Maybe like some over, I don't know if the sort of lead page for the work group says that.
Right, but
Be
maybe
helpful
making
to,
that more
like,
clear.
Spell that
Clarify
out
that,
more.
just like who, you know, if the superintendent is the only one empowered to create a work group, like just say that.
Right.
Sure.
Okay.
And then if they're reporting to the board, like, or coming and giving reports, or whatever,
Yeah.
presentations, what's the purpose of that? Because it does seem like there's some significant work, like particularly at the wellness committee, like, you know, introducing this new screener, like, that then subsequently gets approved by the board, so they're.
We didn't approve the screener.
Right.
I mean, anything that the work group is doing is because the administration has decided that they need to do that because they need to get at the
I see what
goals.
you're saying.
So.
Yeah, okay.
So a lot of
Yeah,
the
thank you.
But I
communication
appreciate,
really is
I
updates.
appreciate the questions around
Yeah.
clarity, so,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Might come up here, my purse gets caught on the chair. David Armenta, 4400 North Wildwood. I just wanted to say there's a really good resource. The State Attorney General has a guidebook on open meetings law that's really clearly written and very useful. And I've read it a couple of times, and I do think they mention specifically a case of a superintendent who appointed a committee in a school district to advise on like library books or something about books. So it was entirely within the purview of the superintendent. and that the rule was that that was subject to open meetings. So, I would suggest you take a look at that.
Great.
Especially if they are making reports or recommendations or in any way, addressing policy issues before a board. And the open meetings law is really, and it says in the preamble of the statute that it's meant to be taken, to apply very broadly. It's not like, let's go to the minimum that we can do. It's supposed to be because, people have a right to know what's happening and how decisions are being made and how appointments to those boards are being made and who is appointed. And they have a right to go and watch the meeting if they want to, and they have a right to, I guess they don't have a right to participate, but they do have a right to go and watch. I just had a question about this game survey, and I think Tim mentioned that if a student was flagged as needing, mental health services or needing some help, that the district would then, that they would be referred to district resources for mental health. Did I get that right?
Which survey?
I think, you'd have to ask Tim to get clarification on that.
Well, I just asked.
Well, I mean, but he's not up here, so you're
Right.
feel free to go ask him.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So board governance. Up first is our linkage calendar. I just realized that November 13th is gonna be a really long night because we have another linkage that afternoon. So I think my plan was to bring this to the retreat in a couple weeks because we have some time. It's not till November. And we will bring your calendars and we'll give Beta kind of what we're gonna do for that. But just so people have it, this is what we passed out at the Forms of Feast Day. Okay, WASB update. So this is you, Lance, the conference you went to?
Yep, right, way back in July 13th and 14th.
Lance, before you go there, can I just, looking at this, can we consider potentially changing the 13th? And that is you're asking for kind of a absurd date, but somebody has to be at a student one, then the SEA one, which we'd all like to be at, but it's tough to be at, and then we have a board meeting with 2 very long reports. I mean, I think in the interest of us being on our
Fresh
game,
and
that
productive.
maybe we look at
Yeah.
rescheduling the ones that are on the 13th, because that's a pretty big day for us.
Okay. So when Brian and I meet, we'll talk about the schedule, and then the SEA is, I think, probably more difficult to
I know.
reschedule, so we have to think about
Yeah.
how we do
Or-
it.
We have a nice dinner that night, and we'll go in.
From our new provider. Yeah, okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, let's just talk about it.
Okay.
But maybe the student one.
Yeah, I can't do that anyway, then Tuesday's my worst day.
Okay, so go ahead, Lance. You went to a safety and security
Everybody
conference?
ready?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I went to a 2-day meeting that WASB put on. It's kind of an off-cycle meeting, I think, for them. It was two things: school safety seminar and summer leadership institute. It was all day, 2 tracks. I couldn't attend everything, but I brought resources back from it, all the handouts and everything, and I'll share that with Brian, I think, primarily. And I guess with the school safety thing, the one, first of all, everybody was trying to figure out where their school safety grants were at the time. Some districts had gotten them, there was no rhyme or reason we hadn't gotten ours, but now we have. There were a number of interesting presentations about, school safety initiatives. The one thing, with our open campus, we're so different, and that was a little, I didn't find many other campuses that were dealing with similar issues like ours. But I don't think I did, actually. I mean, I'm sure there are, but I didn't talk to them. But one thing that did come up that I thought was worth just throwing into the mix is, the idea of having students have ID badges that they use or that they swipe. That the doors can be locked between class periods or during class periods, so the doors are locked. They're unlocked 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after passing time, but then they're locked. And then people swipe in and you got 200 kids moving in and out. So it's not, you know, one-for-one swiping and entering, and you don't track students' location that way or anything, but it's just a little bit more secure than having the doors open all the time. So that was one suggestion that someone made to somebody else's question actually about that.
And if we go to electronic strike, I'm assuming that would be possible to do that. I don't know. That's a question.
Well, and if we had a main entrance that was, I mean, it would then really force people to use only one entrance, because there would only be one unlocked door.
You
I'm sorry.
put it at
For a
multiple
visitor?
entrances.
The idea would be
Like
that
for
all the
students.
doors, all the access doors, you know, on both ends of the building, front and all that would be just locked, except
During
you
the
could always swipe
5
in with a
minutes before,
card.
5 minutes
Oh.
after.
At every
We could
door.
always swipe in with a card.
But visitors would only wouldn't be able to get in.
You ever
'Cause
say
they wouldn't
yeah,
have a-
access?
They
Yeah.
wouldn't have a card.
Okay.
Right, so.
So was
anyway,
this another district that had multiple buildings? They were, do you remember?
I cannot remember exactly how that, it's been 2 months now,
Yeah, I know.
how that exactly came up. Maybe I asked the question of the presenters, you know, hey, we've got this
And they
different
suggested it?
situation here.
Yeah.
And they said, here's
Oh,
one
okay.
thing you could do. Yeah, so I thought that was worth thinking about if we're moving in the direction of more. You know, we're not gonna connect everything, we're not gonna have one entrance, et cetera. So, and then the second day was the Summer Leadership Institute, which was a lot about school financing and kind of getting new school board members up to speed. And I got the sense that, you know, we have a lot of things in place and we're operating really well compared to a lot of school districts. So I was happy to hear that. I was happy to get that sense. So that's kind of that.
Okay. And so we should all, I think, we all probably got in our mail the new WASB schedule for different meetings. So if there's other ones that people want to go to, they start scheduling them for the fall now. So if there's, you know, other interesting ones that come up that you're like, oh, I'd like to go, let Veda know, because we can, yeah, we can reserve you, yeah, and sign you up. All right, so the WASB resolution, I brought this up a while ago. September 15th is when our resolutions are due for districts. I'm on the committee again that makes the decisions. So the one that I think we were thinking of sending, and I don't know, is just the one that we just passed around, or that we just signed around special ed vouchers.
Right.
But I didn't know if there was anything else that people, I haven't had a chance to talk to the SEA, and I don't know if you have, about other kind of issues.
Not about other issues, no. I'm wondering, have we submitted the voucher transfer, voucher transparency resolution to
Other than
WASB?
the tax transparency piece?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We wrote that one back
Last fall?
in the
Or
fall,
early
and I
spring, yeah.
think,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Gosh, I
regarding the
wish-
property tax transparency
right.
piece.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
to me, now would be a time,
Yeah,
like,
that
as
would
as
be-
those are being harvested.
Yes.
Okay, so I can do both. I have both.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was
There's
that
like
one,
a
and
form.
what was the other resolution?
We had done one on gun related.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
The gun one, though, I think, I mean, there's already one on the books. I mean, so
Okay.
I don't think that one, there actually might be one already on the tax transparency. I'll have to check. So,
Yeah, so I think we need to add our name to the list, and we learned today, and we'll give you an update on some more districts that are signing on.
For
to that.
special ed.
Yeah,
Okay.
For special ed voucher.
okay. So, I'll get that done by the 15th. So seed, Lance, were you at the
Mhm.
seed meeting yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Any updates for the board?
What does the board really need to know here? I mean, SEED's doing great. They're raising a lot of money for the district. They're spending it. They're giving grants to teachers. And they are thinking very carefully about how to keep their donations at the same level or higher levels, knowing that some big donors are kind of having their students graduate and maybe not donating as much in the future. And there's some detailed stuff that I guess is not relevant to the board about where they're having, or who holds the money for them, that they're kind of wrestling with right now. Brian, I don't know, anything else that needs to be?
No, I would just say, so they did elect a new member to the board, Sarah Hammond, was elected to the board,
great.
and so her interest, skill set and interest, and SEED's need meshed very well with the idea of storytelling and marketing, and being able to really kind of match what these grants are really doing, and kind of capturing that in narrative and in videos and reporting it back out and having that be part of what they're doing. SEED has done a good job in the last couple of years of bringing recipients back to their meetings to talk about, you know, how not only did we give you the money and you bought some things with it, but how did it impact, you know, your classroom and the students' experience. So our teachers have done a nice job that have been recipients of that money. So now the idea is, now that we know those stories, like what does SEED do with it? And again, Ted's working closely with them on that. So Sarah is very interested as part of that. So I think that's an interesting dynamic as they're moving forward. So.
Great.
Anything they need from us? They didn't make any?
No.
Okay.
No.
I did ask them to be advocates for, you know, talking about the facilities plan with people, I think, as it develops, you know. That makes sense. Yeah.
Great. All right, and then this morning was SWASA?
It was. So, it's been a long day.
Oh, you're like channeling Patrick.
Brian picked me up before at about 10 to 7 a.m.
Wow.
We haven't stopped all day. And before I go down that windy road that Joanne knows I like to go down after night.
Pull back.
Hold back.
Hear more about that.
Yeah, no, so basically what was highlighted were the results of a survey that was given to the SWASA members, board members and superintendents, and highlighting basically our top priority of the SWASA members, and the thing that we most appreciate about SWASA is the legislative advocacy. And having kind of our finger on the pulse of things. So we did spend a lot of time at the end of the meeting in groups talking about and prioritizing some issues that are important to us. And this is a very diverse group, right? You've got MPS at the table, you've got Elmbrook, Mequon and Shorewood, Whitefish Bay, and we all had different populations and different
Racine.
communities. And yeah, Racine's there. Now there's a lot of school districts that are members, but that don't necessarily send they don't send a delegation regularly. I feel like, you know, there's a cohort that's always there. And that leads me to the topic of the special ed vouchers. I wrote Terry Phillips last night because this wasn't on the agenda, asking that she give me a moment to talk about what we had been doing. There was really good feedback when we walked in. The superintendent of Whitefish Bay said that their board had just passed a letter. We, Kettle Moraine passed a resolution. Eau Claire, Pecatonica, which I learned is near where Brian grew up. South Milwaukee passed a resolution not as strong as ours. I believe Waukesha is looking, and other districts that I may have missed. I don't know, Elmbrook.
Mequon, Thiensville will also be following our lead.
Yeah, and
They like to do that.
yeah, so it was really a neat moment where you know, this is something that we can all get on board,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you're from Elmbrook, Waukesha, or MPS. This is something, and it's got some momentum. And leading to that, they're also, as part of their legislative advocacy, hoping to bring in the gubernatorial candidates, although they think it'll be a challenge to get them both at the same time. So they may have a separate event where we'll get to meet Governor Walker. It looks like Superintendent Evers may be at the next meeting in October. So if you haven't had a chance to meet him or hear him, you could always go. I've heard him lots of times, so I may stay home that day, sleep an extra half hour. And I think that's about it on SWASA, unless do you have anything else that I?
No, but just to give Pablo some recognition, so he had talked about our resolution with the entire group, got a very favorable response from the work that we did. I had superintendents come up to me afterwards asking for the copy of what we
Okay.
did.
Nice.
And it did rise to one of the top 2 priorities for our legislative session. So this is something that everybody, there's a consensus in the group that this is something that can happen. And I just want to thank Pablo for his work on it. And,
Yeah, thank you.
Nice,
advocacy.
thanks, Paolo.
Thank you.
Okay, so we had our last FAC meeting last week, Wednesday, and, we're in the process of finalizing the survey. So, I talked to Sue yesterday, to talk about the changes we had made. Joanna sent some additional, to all of us, some additional, like, I would say tweaking of language on the front page that I hope, hopefully people have seen.
Joanne, your feedback was, did you send me?
She's, yeah,
Yeah.
she sent an email.
She said she loved it, it was perfect.
So I guess the one thing there's 2 things I wanna
Oh, we'll freeze over.
talk about. So, we had, one of the things that came up from the FACT meeting was this idea of like, should we get rid of the question that's kind of like the general, what advice would you give the district? So, and I wanted to share with you Sue's response. So she said this is in part, a way to get people to read what's before. People, in her experience, people are more likely to read what's prior to a question if they know there is a question to be asked about it.
Oh,
So it's like a survey tool
okay.
to get people to read more,
Or to read more carefully?
to read more carefully.
So rather than just, this is on page 3. right?
Yeah, so
than
then rather just
leave
saying
it
like
off.
this is background information,
Yeah.
They might just go
people
flip.
might just flip.
Okay.
Now, I mean, okay, and she agreed with us, right? I think the concern was that people aren't gonna really know, like, I don't know. I think it was actually Sarah who said, you know, like, I don't know how to answer, like, would I pursue capital referendum when I don't have any of the information yet? And she thinks that, like, what we're trying to do is make the argument here that why we would go, even without telling you how much it costs, do you think this is something that we should be doing, right? So that was her advice on that. So that's why it's back in.
Well, I mean, I guess one of the comments could be if it's just should we do nothing, not sure, or go forward, instead of saying pursue a capital referendum, do we just say, you know, continue, or something to that, I mean.
Or skip to the end.
No,
Well-
to the point of if it's I don't know, if that's gonna beg I don't know, cause I don't know what it is there a way to make that a less specific question, yet still ask the question about continue the process?
Oh.
Well, I'm wondering
You
if
know what I
instead of
mean?
saying capital referendum, we say like something, and I could ask her this, like, pursue funding options,
Yeah,
right, to address these needs, or
Right.
something like that.
right,
You know, so,
Right.
right, something that's a little bit more,
that's not very,
Broad.
as specific,
Right.
that I think got at that particular
Right.
point.
Okay.
that doesn't beg that other question,
Fair
yeah.
point.
Right.
Yeah.
I think she liked all the other kind of changes that we made in response to what we heard from the FACT team. And you'll see that, you know, all the things that we changed were adopted essentially, so.
Are we open for comments on this, or do we want to discuss it? Right. I have just one thing
Yeah.
that was brought up that someone at the FACT meeting suggested this under the page 5, base plan, safety and security, specifically mentioning moving offices instead of just renovate main building entrances, but something, you know, I think the point
Oh,
was
right,
that
that
the
came up with it.
9.4 million seems a little, doesn't line up
Gives you a
very
sticker
well.
shock when you
But when we talk
see
about
the 3 bullet points.
something more about like.
I think we talked about the language at our, the next day, it was it renovating?
That's what we have in
That's what we
here.
have, renovating main building entrances. Okay.
That's what we-
Renovate or relocate, cause in some cases it's renovate, in some cases it's relocate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like
just do
that, to say
that.
this is a bigger, I mean,
Right.
what it actually
Renovate
is
and
moving
or.
the whole front
It could be a
office to a
yeah.
different location and changing the entrances. So
how about, renovate, or, I mean, do you think it's true to say that we'd be creating new entries at the two elementaries? We would be.
We're gonna be using the same
We're
entries.
gonna use the
we're
same
just-
door, we're just
Yeah,
gonna
I
change
guess.
the
I
way
mean,
it
they
went
go in a
through
different
it
way,
would
but
change
yeah,
it.
okay.
So it's renovate or, it's relocate or reconfigure.
I don't know,
something.
all those words seem like people are gonna be like, who knows
I don't know
what that
what
means?
that
Yeah,
means.
so, but we can maybe ask her about a stronger, or I could ask Bob about that. So was there anything else?
Harvey, do you want to talk about, on page 5 in the gray box, we had, I think it was last time that we had we
Oh,
said a
right.
yes, no.
Oh, we took out
The
the,
yes, no.
And,
probably
oh yeah,
the-
she also
Right,
said that
yeah.
that's also a Likert scale that they have found to be useful,
Okay.
in their analysis.
Okay,
So I said,
so
okay,
then
I'll put it back.
that's helpful. The stuff that I sent out, I made changes to the cover letter that you guys can, tell me what you think. And the only other thing, as I was reading it for the first time, I literally didn't look at it for a couple of days for the schedule, which was good. And I wondered as I went through it, and I don't know, but when we get to, after page 4, before we get to potential capital referendum questions, I wondered if there may be value in taking the material that is on page 11, starting with funding support for both of them, and take that first section and from the word funding to the total and put it in front of it. This kind of speaks to the comment that came from a couple of the people that from the FAC meeting that said, if we don't provide the kind of totality piece up front, then it looks like we're starting in a different direction. We're trying to build up as opposed to say, here's everything, and now here's the base plan, here's the component pieces, and then come back in and say, tax implications. And then run through the schematics and then just insert another header where it says the following table, where we call, we can call this like tax impacts or something like that. I just wondered if we might split this and move that piece up.
So the whole list of the total costs?
Right, the piece of, where we talk about the cost of all of these was this, and then we, narrowed it, and we might need to do this in phases. So we're basically laying out where we're going to then take them diagrammatically in the next portion, right? So we would move that to the top of page 5, and then we go through potential capital referendum questions, base plan, all these component pieces that are laid out here, and then we come back to the tax implications. It's just, I want you guys to think about it.
Okay. Maybe I'll see what else, I'll ask her to make the changes and we can look at it.
Look at it both ways, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was just being mindful of the few people that commented. I think Katie might have been one of the comments, and a couple of the written-in comments that came that said, if you don't tell everybody what you were looking at into the big picture, then I feel like you're baby stepping me and I'm gonna stop at the first piece. And this way
Yeah.
we lay it all out and then we go through the detail.
Okay.
So
You could even leave it, have it in there twice, right?
You could.
Right above
You
the.
could.
Right.
You repeat it,
Right.
right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then obviously the word above would have to be changed to be below if we moved it, so. Okay, that's my only comment.
So if there's suggestions, part of it, you're taking those? if
I'll
anybody
take
has
them and I'll
those?
send them back to her and then, yeah,
Okay.
I'll make sure she sends us a final copy. The goal is still to get it to the proofers, the proofers in Myron this week, by the end of the week, so. Okay.
Which is why I was hell-bent on getting to it today between my classes.
That's good.
All right, and then board retreat agenda. So
Thanks for-
I have on here, we're gonna talk about R3 and R4. We're gonna look at our linkage calendar. Is there other things that people wanna put on there? I'm sure we'll have other things to talk about. I mean, we probably, yeah, no, those are the in terms of linkage calendar, we should also talk about like what we wanna present at the
Right.
linkages, so. Okay.
I would like to propose that, I know we need to talk about it, I would like to make sure that we don't let the linkages become facilities meetings. I think we're gonna do enough of that, people may wanna do a little bit of that, but I think I would like to have us focus on kind of the stuff that we talked about today and how we're, some of the changes that we're making are looking at this integration piece of Workgroup the classroom and the fine tuning work that we're doing. That seems to me to be
Yeah, maybe a very brief synopsis and then directing them to the website.
Right.
Right, 'cause
But then let's remember that we wanna have, it's only an hour, we wanna
Right.
give them opportunity.
To
And
talk.
some groups, and I guess the other thing I'd like to add is, one of the struggles, I think, with the spring linkages was we got the feedback in January as to what they wanted to talk about, like 2 months later.
Right.
By the time 2 months later
Right.
rolled around,
It's changed.
issues have, but yet that was what was on the agenda. So we might want to find a way to get feedback from them
Much more real
closer
time. Yeah.
to the date. And then maybe we don't need to have too much
Yeah.
from us there. Brief synopsis on facilities,
Little update on
a
how we're
little
tweaking
update on
policies.
this, and then
whatever.
their concerns, whatever they wanna talk about, but more real time.
Mhm.
So I remember, I think it was the
yeah,
Lake
fine with
looking
that.
forward to
Bluff, the
that.
Lake
I mean,
Bluff
especially
one.
since it's like November and we'll have already, I mean,
Right.
yeah, so, okay.
Okay.
Maybe we can discuss that. Okay. I'll put out an agenda, for the retreat and send it to you guys, and then if there's other things we wanna add, we can. Okay, we don't have anything on our action agenda. I will take a motion for the board consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you to Mr., is it Lapidus? Is that how you say his last name? Who donated $2,500
Right.
for the,
Class of 1963.
yes, library collaboration space. Okay, public comment number 3. No? All right, so, review of to-do items.
So I have worked through November 13th, the entire calendar for the day, so we're not so exhausted by the end of the day
Yeah.
that. So we'll look at school perceptions, the research study linkages, and we'll do some massaging there to make it reasonable. Work through some of the suggestions for the work group, the communications for the work groups, the history, membership, contact information, that type of thing. So I can work with Ted on that. And then just the retreat agenda items, which I think you have.
Okay.
So.
And then I have in mind, retreat agenda, and I'll send notes to Sue about the survey.
Is it possible, since a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in terms of the R3 and R4 work is related to school perceptions, can we get a list of the school perceptions questions? So we might be able to also go through and look at the ones and how we might want to pull them and group them?
Yeah, to bring that
That'd
to
be
the
help-
retreat.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Suggestion.
okay.
And then are there any future agenda items that people would like to see that we don't currently have? No? Okay, let me know. All right, well then we're in recess.